I hired her to pretend to love me for one night. I never expected her to be richer than everyone in that room combined, or that she'd been pretending her entire life. Daniel Brooks thought he had it all figured out. One gala, one professional companion, zero complications. But when the woman at his door introduced herself as Iris, he stepped into a world where nothing was as it seemed. What started as a business transaction became the most dangerous thing a guarded single father could face: real connection. This is a story about masks we wear, walls we build, and what happens when two broken people dare to be seen. Drop a comment with your city below. Let's see how far this story travels. Hit that like button and settle in. This one's going to surprise you. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning, wedged between a meeting reminder and a notification about his daughter's upcoming field trip. Daniel Brooks stared at the subject line, "Mandatory Attendance, Annual Summit Gala," and felt his chest tighten in the particular way it always did when his carefully ordered life demanded something he couldn't control. He read it twice, then a third time, hoping the words would rearrange themselves into something less absolute. They didn't. "Daddy, you're making your thinking face." Daniel glanced up from his laptop to find Emma standing in the doorway of his home office, her favorite stuffed rabbit dangling from one hand. She was 6 years old, observant in the unsettling way children often are, and she'd inherited her mother's ability to read him like headlines. "Just work stuff, sweetheart," he said, forcing his expression into something approximating calm. "Nothing to worry about." Emma patted across the hardwood floor in her mismatched socks, one with dinosaurs, one with rainbows, because she'd declared that morning that matching is boring, and climbed into his lap with the casual confidence of someone who knew she'd always be welcome there. "Is it a bad email?" she asked, peering at the screen. "Not bad, just complicated." Mommy used to say complicated is just another word for annoying. Daniel felt the familiar tug in his chest, the one that came whenever Emma mentioned her mother with that matter-of-fact tone, as if Sarah were simply away on a trip rather than gone for 3 years. He pressed a kiss to the top of Emma's head, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. "Mommy was very smart," he said quietly. Emma seemed satisfied with this answer. She wiggled off his lap and headed toward the door, then paused, turning back with the kind of timing that suggested she'd been planning this exit line all along. "Mrs. Chen says you should go to more parties. She says you work too much." "Mrs. Chen talks too much," Daniel muttered. But Emma had already disappeared down the hallway, her laughter trailing behind her like music. He returned his attention to the email. The annual summit gala. Black tie. Spouses and partners encouraged. A celebration of the company's most successful quarter in 5 years, hosted at the Fairmont Copley Plaza, attended by everyone who mattered in Boston's tech sector. His boss, Richard Chen, husband to the aforementioned Mrs. Chen and Emma's classmate's father, had made it clear in their last one-on-one that attendance wasn't optional. "You're brilliant, Brooks," Richard had said, leaning back in his chair with the ease of a man who'd never felt uncomfortable in a room full of people. "But you're invisible. The executives upstairs don't know who you are. They see your work, sure, but they don't see you. You want to move up? You need to show up." Daniel had nodded, knowing Richard was right, hating that he was right. The problem wasn't the gala itself. Daniel could handle a suit, small talk, expensive wine he'd pretend to enjoy. The problem was the unspoken requirement that had nothing to do with professional competence and everything to do with optics. He needed to arrive with someone. In the world Richard and his colleagues inhabited, a world of power couples and strategic partnerships where even social events were networking opportunities, showing up alone marked you as incomplete, unserious, unambitious. A man who couldn't manage his personal life certainly couldn't be trusted with greater responsibility. Daniel had been alone for 3 years. He'd built a life around that aloneness, constructed it with the same precision he brought to code architecture. Wake at 6. Make Emma breakfast. Walk her to school. Work until 3. Pick her up. Homework, dinner, bath time, bedtime stories. Then back to his laptop for a few more hours of work before sleep claimed him. Weekends were for the park, the library, the aquarium, the Museum of Science, for building pillow forts and teaching Emma to ride her bike and pretending he knew how to braid hair. There was no space in that life for dating, no energy for the delicate dance of getting to know someone, no time for the inevitable moment when he'd have to explain that his daughter came first, would always come first. And if they couldn't accept that, the door was right there. He'd tried once, about a year after Sarah died. A woman from his gym, kind and patient, who'd seemed genuinely interested in both him and Emma. They'd made it 3 months before she gently suggested that maybe he wasn't really ready, that grief was a process, that he should take more time. She'd been right. He hadn't been ready. He wasn't sure he ever would be. But none of that changed the reality of the email glowing on his screen, or Richard's voice in his head, or the creeping certainty that if he showed up alone to this gala, he'd be confirming every quiet assumption his colleagues had already made about him, that he was stuck, stagnant, a man who'd chosen safety over ambition. Daniel closed his laptop and rubbed his eyes. Outside his window, Boston's autumn afternoon was fading into evening, the trees along their residential street showing off their best impression of fire. He loved this city, loved this neighborhood, loved the predictability of seasons that changed on schedule, and neighbors who waved and a daughter who thought mismatched socks were a form of rebellion. He loved his small, quiet, carefully controlled life. And he was about to do something that contradicted everything that life stood for. The conversation happened 3 days later, during lunch in the company cafeteria. Daniel had been avoiding it, but Richard had a gift for gentle persistence that made avoidance impossible. "You got the email," Richard said. It wasn't a question. Daniel pushed his salad around his plate. "Yeah." And I'll be there." Richard studied him over the rim of his coffee cup. They'd worked together for 6 years, long enough that Richard could read the hesitation in Daniel's voice, the tension in his shoulders. "You planning to go solo?" Daniel didn't answer, which was answer enough. Richard set down his cup with care, the gesture somehow conveying both sympathy and determination. "Look, I get it. The whole couples thing, it's outdated, it's superficial, it shouldn't matter. But it does. Especially with the executives. They're old school. They see a successful, put-together guy with a beautiful partner. They think stability, leadership potential, someone who has it all figured out." "I don't have it all figured out," Daniel said quietly. "None of us do. But we can look like we do for one night." Richard leaned forward, lowering his voice. "There are services, professional services. Completely legitimate. People hire companions for events like this all the time." Daniel's head snapped up. "You're suggesting I hire an escort?" "I'm suggesting you hire a professional companion for a professional event," Richard corrected. "Someone who knows how to navigate these situations, who can make conversation, who can make you look good. No strings, no complications. Just one night." The idea should have repulsed him. It did repulse him, on principle. The transactional nature of it, the dishonesty, the sheer strangeness of paying someone to pretend to care about him. But beneath the repulsion was something else. Relief. A solution. A way to meet the unspoken requirement without actually disrupting his life, without risking the fragile equilibrium he'd built. "I wouldn't even know where to start," Daniel said, and even as the words left his mouth, he knew he'd already decided. Richard pulled out his phone, tapped a few times, then showed Daniel the screen. A website, elegant and discreet, with the kind of professional polish that suggested serious money and serious clients. "This is the service my brother used when he needed a date for his medical conference last year," Richard said. "Very professional, very careful about screening both clients and companions. You tell them what you need, they match you with someone appropriate. You meet beforehand, make sure it's a good fit. If it's not, they'll find someone else." Daniel stared at the website. The tagline read, "Discretion, elegance, professionalism." "I can't believe I'm considering this," he muttered. "Consider it a business expense," Richard said with a slight smile, "an investment in your career." That night, after Emma was asleep, Daniel sat in his home office with a glass of whiskey he didn't really want and his laptop open to the website Richard had shown him. He read every page twice. The testimonials, the FAQ, the carefully worded descriptions of services that emphasize companionship, conversation, and social support. The questionnaire was thorough. What type of event? What atmosphere should your companion convey? What topics should they be comfortable discussing? Any specific requirements or preferences? Daniel filled it out with the same methodical attention he brought to everything else, trying not to think too hard about what he was doing, what it meant, what Sarah would think if she could see him now. He submitted it at 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday night and received a response by noon the next day. The agency had 3 potential matches. He could review their profiles, first names only, carefully curated photos that showed elegance without revealing too much, and select someone for a preliminary meeting. If the meeting went well, they'd proceed with arrangements for the gala. If not, no obligation, no judgment, no hard feelings. Daniel studied the profiles. All 3 women were beautiful, poised, clearly experienced at this kind of work. But one caught his attention, held it. Her name was listed as Iris. The photo showed a woman in her early 30s, he guessed, with dark hair pulled back in a simple style that somehow suggested both sophistication and approachability. She wasn't smiling in the picture, but there was something in her eyes. Intelligence, maybe? Or humor? Or a kind of knowing calm that suggested she'd seen enough of the world not to be surprised by it. The brief bio noted that she was comfortable in corporate environments, had extensive experience with high-profile events, and was particularly skilled at making clients feel at ease in challenging social situations. Daniel selected her before he could talk himself out of it. The meeting was arranged for Sunday afternoon at a quiet cafe in Cambridge, far enough from his neighborhood that he wouldn't run into anyone he knew. Neutral territory, public enough to be safe, private enough for conversation. He told Emma he had a work meeting, which was technically true if you squinted at the definition of work. Mrs. Chen agreed to watch her for a few hours, and if she suspected anything unusual about a Sunday afternoon meeting, she was kind enough not to mention it. Daniel arrived at the cafe 15 minutes early, claimed a corner table, and ordered a coffee he was too nervous to drink. He dressed carefully, not too formal, not too casual, aiming for the kind of effortless composure he definitely didn't feel. His hand shook slightly as he checked his phone for the 3rd time in as many minutes. He was about to hire a stranger to pretend to care about him. The absurdity of it threatened to overwhelm him. He could leave. Should leave. Walk out of this cafe and tell Richard he'd changed his mind, show up to the gala alone, accept whatever career consequences followed. He was reaching for his jacket when she walked in. Daniel knew it was her immediately, though she looked different from her photo. More present somehow, more 3-dimensional. She wore dark jeans and a cream-colored sweater, simple gold earrings, minimal makeup. Her hair was down, falling past her shoulders in waves that caught the afternoon light streaming through the cafe windows. She scanned the room with the practiced ease of someone used to reading spaces and people, her gaze landing on him with a flicker of recognition. She smiled, small, professional, carefully calibrated to be warm without being presumptuous, and walked over. "Daniel?" Her voice was lower than he'd expected, with a slight rasp that suggested either too much coffee or too little sleep. He stood, nearly knocking over his cup in the process. "Yes. Hi, you must be Iris." "I must be." She extended her hand, her grip firm and brief. "May I?" He gestured to the seat across from him, and she settled in with an economy of movement that spoke to comfort in her own skin. Up close, he could see details the photo hadn't captured. The slight asymmetry of her features that somehow made her more striking rather than less. The small scar above her left eyebrow, the way her eyes shifted between gray and green depending on the light. Can I get you something?" he asked, grateful for the social script of the question. "Coffee would be great. Black, please." He went to the counter, ordered, and returned to find her studying him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Not judgment exactly, assessment maybe. The kind of careful attention a surgeon might give before making the first incision. "So," she said when he sat down. "Your first time doing this?" Daniel nearly choked on his coffee. "Is it that obvious?" "You look like you're about to bolt out the door any second." She said it kindly, without mockery. "It's okay. Most people are nervous at first. It's a strange situation." "That's putting it mildly." "You could also call it practical," Iris said. "You need a companion for an event. I provide that service. No different than hiring a caterer or a photographer. Except caterers don't pretend to have feelings about you. Something shifted in her expression. There and gone so quickly he might have imagined it. No, she agreed. They don't. The barista called her name, and Iris retrieved her coffee, leaving Daniel to wonder what exactly he'd seen cross her face. When she returned, she seemed to have reset, her professional demeanor back in place like armor. "Tell me about the event," she said. "The agency gave me the basics, but I'd like to hear it from you." So Daniel told her. About the gala, about his company, about Richard's well-meaning pressure and the unspoken rules of professional advancement, about how he'd been alone for 3 years and wasn't ready to change that, but also couldn't afford to look like a man who'd given up on life. He didn't mention Emma, didn't mention Sarah. Some truths were too large, too complicated for a first meeting with a stranger he was paying to like him. Iris listened without interrupting, her attention complete in a way that felt almost uncomfortable. When was the last time someone had listened to him like this? Really listened, without waiting for their turn to talk, without checking their phone, without the 1,000 small signs of distraction that characterized most modern conversation. "Okay," she said when he finished. "I can work with that. Tell me about the environment. Who's going to be there?" "Executives, mostly. VPs, C-suite, some board members, my boss and his wife, a few colleagues from my department." "Industry?" "Tech. Software development." "So I should be comfortable discussing technology, innovation, market trends, but not so knowledgeable that I overshadow you or seem threatening to the wives." Daniel blinked. "That's disturbingly accurate." "It's the game," Iris said with a shrug. "I've played it before. What role do you want me to take? Long-term girlfriend, fiancé, someone you've been seeing casually?" The question should have been simple. It wasn't. "I don't know," Daniel admitted. "What would you suggest?" Iris considered this, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup in a gesture that seemed unconscious, unguarded. "Girlfriend makes sense. Established enough to be serious, new enough to explain why no one's met me before. We can say we've been together 6 months, keeping things quiet because you wanted to be sure before introducing me to your professional circle. That gives us a foundation without too much backstory to maintain." 6 months, Daniel repeated. "That's specific." Specific is believable. Vague makes people suspicious. She met his eyes. "I'll follow your lead on physical contact. Some clients prefer minimal interaction, hand-holding, maybe a hand on the arm. Others want something more convincing, whatever makes you comfortable." The clinical way she discussed it should have bothered him more than it did. Instead, he found himself appreciating the clarity, the lack of pretense. "Minimal," he said. I don't do well with pretending." "Then we won't pretend," Iris said. "We'll be 2 people attending an event together. Everything else is just logistics." They spent the next hour working through details. She asked about his colleagues, the executives, the likely conversation topics. She asked about his own background, what he did, how he'd ended up in Boston, whether he had family in the area. The questions were professional, purposeful, building a framework for the performance they'd give in 2 weeks. But occasionally something else slipped through, a comment that seemed too perceptive, too personal, a question that went deeper than the role required. "Why tech?" she asked at one point. "You don't strike me as someone drawn to flashy innovation for its own sake." Daniel was surprised by the question, more surprised by how much he wanted to answer it honestly. "Control," he said. "Code does what you tell it to do. If it breaks, you can find out why. Fix it. It's logical, predictable. The opposite of most things in life." Iris studied him with those shifting gray-green eyes. "You like predictable." "I like knowing what to expect. And yet here you are, hiring a stranger to play your girlfriend for a night. Not very predictable." "Here I am," he agreed. Something passed between them in that moment. Recognition, maybe, or understanding. The sense that they were both people who'd learned to control their environments because letting go meant chaos. "I should ask," Daniel said, breaking the moment before it could become something he didn't know how to handle. "Why do you do this? This job?" He expected a deflection, a practiced answer about flexibility or good money or enjoying meeting people. Instead, Iris was quiet for a long moment, her gaze drifting to the window where late afternoon sun painted the street gold. "Because it's simpler than the alternative," she finally said. "Which is? Being myself." The answer landed between them like a stone dropped in still water, sending out ripples. Neither of them seemed prepared to navigate. Daniel wanted to ask what she meant, who she really was beneath this role. Why pretending to be someone's companion for professional events felt simpler than whatever her actual life entailed. But he didn't, because that would make this personal, and personal meant complicated, and complicated was exactly what he was trying to avoid. "Well," he said instead, "you're very good at it." Iris's smile was small, tinged with something that might have been sadness. "Thank you." They finished their coffee. Iris pulled out a tablet and showed him examples of appropriate attire for the gala, asked about colors he preferred, confirmed the date and time and location. She gave him her number, a business line, she clarified, not her personal cell, and told him to text if he had questions before the event. "One more thing," she said as they prepared to leave. "The night of the gala, I'll arrive at your apartment 30 minutes before we need to leave. That gives us time to sync up, make sure we're presenting a consistent story. Does that work?" "My apartment?" Daniel hadn't expected that. The agency, he'd assumed, a hotel, somewhere neutral. "It's more natural," Iris explained. "If anyone asks, you picked me up from your place like any couple would. Plus it gives me a chance to see your space, understand your life better, makes the performance more authentic." She was right. Of course she was right. This was her profession after all. But the thought of her in his apartment, in the space he shared with Emma, made something in his chest tighten uncomfortably. "Okay," he said, because he couldn't think of a valid objection. "That works." They stood, gathered their things. At the door, Iris paused, turning back to face him. "You're going to be fine," she said, and for a moment her professional mask slipped enough that he could see genuine reassurance beneath it. "I'll make sure of it." Daniel wanted to ask how she could possibly know that, how she could promise something so far outside her control. But she was already walking away, her dark hair catching the last of the afternoon light, leaving him standing in the doorway of a Cambridge cafe, wondering what exactly he'd just set in motion. But the next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation and second-guessing. Daniel threw himself into work with renewed focus, as if writing enough elegant code could somehow compensate for the fundamental dishonesty of what he was about to do. Emma, mercifully, was too absorbed in her own 6-year-old concerns, an upcoming field trip to the aquarium, a minor drama with her best friend about whose turn it was to be the line leader, to notice her father's distraction. Mrs. Chen noticed. She always noticed. "You seem nervous about something," she said one afternoon when she came by to drop off Emma after school. Daniel had been working from home that day, and he'd made the mistake of answering the door with his tie half knotted, already running through conversation scenarios in his head. "Just a work event coming up," he said, which was true enough. "Ah, the big gala Richard keeps talking about." Mrs. Chen's eyes sparkled with the particular delight of someone who'd just stumbled onto interesting information. "He says you're bringing someone." Daniel's heart sank. Of course Richard had mentioned it. Of course. "It's not a big deal," he said, trying for casual and landing somewhere near strangled. "Not a big deal?" Mrs. Chen's eyebrows rose toward her hairline. "Daniel Brooks, you haven't brought anyone to anything in 3 years. It's definitely a big deal." Emma appeared behind Mrs. Chen, her backpack dragging on the floor. "Daddy has a date?" "It's not a date, sweetheart. Just a work thing." "With a lady?" Emma's eyes went wide with the kind of fascinated horror children reserve for the bizarre behavior of adults. "With a colleague," Daniel said firmly, a lie that was about to become several other lies. A house of cards he was building with increasingly shaky hands. Mrs. Chen mercifully did not push further, though her knowing smile suggested she had plenty more to say on the subject. After she left, Emma cornered him in the kitchen while he was attempting to make dinner. "Mrs. Chen says you should have more fun," Emma announced, climbing onto one of the kitchen stools. "Mrs. Chen has a lot of opinions. She says you're young, and you work too hard and you should go on dates and be happy. Daniel set down the knife he'd been using to chop vegetables and turned to face his daughter. She was swinging her legs, a milk mustache from her after-school snack still visible on her upper lip, looking at him with Sarah's eyes. "I am happy," he said gently. "I have you. That's all I need." Emma considered this with the seriousness of someone far older than 6. "But what about when I'm at school? Are you happy then?" The question hit harder than it should have. Daniel pulled her into a hug, breathing in strawberry shampoo and innocence, and the particular sweetness of a child who worried about her father's loneliness. "I'm always happy when you're around," he said, which wasn't quite an answer, but was the best he could offer. That night, after Emma was asleep, Daniel stood in his closet staring at his suits like they were enemy combatants. He owned 3, 1 navy, 1 charcoal, 1 black. He'd worn the navy to Sarah's funeral, the charcoal to exactly 2 client meetings in the past year. The black never, because he'd bought it optimistically 5 years ago, thinking he'd need it for fancy events that had never materialized. He texted Iris, "Dumb question, but which suit? Black, navy, or charcoal?" Her response came within minutes. "Black. Power color. Shows you're taking it seriously, but navy tie softens it, makes you more approachable." He texted back, "You've thought about this a lot. It's my job to think about this." Daniel stared at the response, at the reminder of what this was, what she was. A professional doing her job. Nothing more. "Right," he typed. "Of course. Thanks." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "You're going to do great. Trust me." He wanted to. God, he wanted to. The night of the gala arrived with the inevitability of deadlines and taxes. Daniel spent the afternoon in a state of controlled panic, triple-checking details he'd already confirmed, running through small-talk scenarios, questioning every decision that had led him to this moment. Emma was spending the night with Mrs. Chen, a sleepover she'd been excited about for days. Daniel walked her over at 4, her overnight bag stuffed with her favorite pajamas and enough stuffed animals to populate a small zoo. "You look fancy, Daddy," Emma said, eyeing his freshly ironed shirt with suspicion. "Just dressed up for the work thing, remember?" "The one with the lady colleague." Emma drew out the word colleague like she was testing its weight, its believability. "That's the one." Mrs. Chen appeared at the door, saving him from further interrogation. "Have a wonderful time," she said, and the knowing look in her eyes suggested she understood far more than he'd told her. Daniel walked back to his apartment through the cooling October evening, the trees overhead rustling in a wind that tasted like coming winter. Inside, he showered, shaved, dressed with meticulous care. Black suit, navy tie, watch Sarah had given him for his 30th birthday, shoes polished to a shine that felt ridiculous for someone who spent 90% of his life in sneakers. He was adjusting his cufflinks for the 3rd time when the doorbell rang. Daniel checked his watch. 6:28 p.m. She was early, or exactly on time, depending on how you measured these things. He took a breath, smoothed his tie one last time, and opened the door. Iris stood in the hallway, and for a moment Daniel forgot how to breathe. She wore a dress the color of deep wine, elegant and simple in a way that suggested serious money without shouting about it. Her hair was up in some kind of intricate style he had no name for, revealing the line of her neck, the delicate gold necklace at her throat. Her makeup was subtle but transformative, emphasizing features he'd noticed at the cafe and adding a layer of polish that belonged to a different world than the one he inhabited. She looked like money, like power, like someone who'd been attending events like this her entire life. "Hi," she said, and the familiar rasp in her voice anchored him, reminded him this was still the woman from the cafe, just dressed for the part she was about to play. "Hi," he managed. "You look incredible." "Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself." She stepped inside and he caught her scent, something subtle and expensive that he couldn't name. "Nice place." Daniel glanced around his apartment, seeing it through her eyes. The worn but comfortable furniture, the photos of Emma everywhere, the organized chaos of a single father's life, school artwork on the fridge, sneakers by the door, a basket of folded laundry he hadn't put away yet. "It's not much," he started. "It's a home," Iris said, and something in her voice made it sound like a compliment. She moved through the space with that same economy of movement he'd noticed before, taking in details without touching anything. She paused at a photo on the bookshelf. Emma on a swing, mid-laugh, joy captured in perfect focus. "Your daughter?" Iris asked. Daniel's stomach dropped. He'd meant to put that photo away, to hide the evidence of the life he hadn't mentioned. "Yes, Emma. She's 6. Iris turned to look at him, and he braced for the questions, the complications, the reasonable concerns about a man who'd hired her without mentioning he had a child. "She's beautiful," Iris said simply. "She has your eyes." "She has her mother's everything else." Iris's gaze sharpened, reading between the lines of what he hadn't said. "Her mother?" "Died. 3 years ago. Cancer." The words still felt strange in his mouth, too small for the enormity of what they described. Iris was quiet for a long moment, and Daniel waited for the pity, the awkward condolences, the shift in how she saw him. Instead, she said, "That's why you like predictable, why you built this life so carefully." It wasn't a question, it was understanding, clear-eyed, and without judgment, and it hit him harder than sympathy would have. "Yeah," he said quietly. "That's why." Iris nodded, turned back to the photo. "She's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have her." They stood like that for a moment. Two strangers in his living room, the ghost of his dead wife hovering between them like smoke. Then Iris straightened, and when she looked at him again, her professional mask was back in place. "Okay," she said. "Let's go over the story one more time. We've been together 6 months. We met through, what did we decide?" "Mutual friends," Daniel said, grateful to return to logistics. "A dinner party. We hit it off." "Right, I work in consulting, corporate consulting. It's vague enough to be believable." "Perfect. And we're serious but not engaged. Taking things slow because of Emma, making sure it's right before making any big changes." Daniel nodded, though the fabricated story sat uncomfortably on his conscience. All these lies, stacked carefully on top of each other, a foundation built on nothing. "You ready?" Iris asked. No, he thought, not even close. "Yes," he said. She smiled, stepped closer, and straightened his tie with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Her fingers brushed his collar, and he caught that scent again, felt the warmth of her presence in his space. "Remember," she said softly, "I'm going to make you look good tonight. That's what you're paying me for. All you have to do is be yourself." "Being myself is exactly the problem," Daniel muttered. "No," Iris said, her gray-green eyes holding his with unexpected intensity. "Being yourself is your greatest asset. You're genuine, sincere. In a room full of people performing success, that's going to stand out." Before he could respond, she stepped back, the moment broken. She gathered her clutch from where she'd set it on the side table, checked her reflection in the hallway mirror with professional efficiency. "Car service should be here in 5 minutes," she said. "Shall we?" Daniel grabbed his wallet and keys, took one last look at his carefully ordered life, and followed Iris out into the hallway. The car was waiting when they stepped outside, a sleek black sedan that probably cost more per hour than Daniel spent on groceries in a week. The driver held the door open, and Iris slid in with the fluid grace of someone accustomed to being assisted into expensive vehicles. Daniel followed more awkwardly, hyper-aware of how out of place he felt in this world of car services and professional companions and corporate galas. Inside the car, Iris settled into her seat, arranging her dress with absent precision. The partition between them and the driver was up, creating a bubble of privacy as the city slid past the tinted windows. "You're nervous," Iris observed. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who's looking." She turned to face him more fully. "What's the worst thing that happens tonight?" Daniel considered. "I say something stupid. Everyone realizes I don't belong there. My career stalls because I couldn't even pretend to be the kind of person they want on their executive track." "Okay, and the best thing?" I don't know. I survived the night without embarrassing myself." Iris shook her head. "Think bigger. Best case scenario, you make real connections. You show these executives that you're not just a brilliant coder, but someone with depth, presence, substance. You prove to yourself that you can exist in spaces outside the carefully controlled life you've built." She paused. And maybe you even enjoy yourself a little. Enjoy myself, Daniel repeated skeptically. Revolutionary concept, I know. He laughed despite himself, some of the tension in his shoulders easing. You're good at this, the pep talk thing. I've had practice. Iris glanced out the window as they turned onto Boylston Street, the lights of the city reflecting in her eyes. Most of my clients are terrified before these events. They're convinced they're going to fail, be exposed as frauds, reveal themselves as somehow insufficient. But you want to know a secret? What? Everyone in that room feels the same way. Every single person, no matter how successful, how powerful, how confident they seem. They're all performing. They're all terrified someone's going to see through the performance to whatever they think they're really hiding. She turned back to him. The only difference is some people are better actors than others. And you? What about me? What are you hiding? The question slipped out before Daniel could stop it. Too personal, too direct. Iris's expression shifted. Surprise, maybe, or something harder to name. That, she said softly, is not part of what you're paying for. The car pulled up to the Fairmont Copley Plaza, cutting off whatever Daniel might have said in response. Outside, the hotel glowed with warm light, its historic facade framing an entrance where couples and groups were arriving in a steady stream of expensive clothing and practiced smiles. The driver opened the door. Iris stepped out first, and Daniel watched as she transformed, her posture straightening, her expression settling into something polished and perfect. By the time he joined her on the sidewalk, she was someone else entirely, poised, confident, every inch the successful consultant attending a gala with her software developer boyfriend. She linked her arm through his, the contact light but deliberate. Showtime, she murmured, and together they walked into the light. The lobby of the Fairmont was all marble and gold, restored grandeur that spoke to old money and older traditions. A string quartet played something classical and elegant in one corner. Servers in crisp uniforms circulated with champagne. The crowd was exactly what Daniel had expected. Men in expensive suits, women in designer dresses, everyone performing success with varying degrees of conviction. "Daniel, there you are!" Richard materialized from the crowd, his wife Linda beside him. They both looked genuinely delighted to see him, which somehow made the whole situation worse. "Richard, Linda, this is Iris," Daniel said, his voice steadier than he felt. "Iris, this is my boss Richard and his wife Linda." Iris extended her hand with warmth that seemed entirely genuine. "So wonderful to meet you both. Daniel's told me so much about you." "Has he?" Linda's eyes sparkled with curiosity. "He's been keeping you very quiet." "I can't blame him," Iris said smoothly. "When you find something good, you want to keep it to yourself for a while." She glanced at Daniel, and the affection in her expression was so convincing he almost believed it himself. Richard laughed. "Well, we're glad he's finally sharing. What do you do, Iris?" "Corporate consulting, strategy and optimization mostly. I work with firms looking to streamline operations, improve efficiency." "Fascinating," Richard said, and appeared to mean it. "What brings you to Boston? Originally, I mean. You don't have that local accent." "All over originally," Iris said with an easy smile. "I've lived in a lot of places. Boston's been home for the last few years, though. I like the energy here. Ambitious, but still human scale, you know?" She was flawless. Every answer perfectly calibrated, every gesture reinforcing the story they'd built. She asked Linda about her work at the hospital, engaged Richard in a brief but impressive discussion about emerging tech trends, and made Daniel look good with subtle touches and glances that suggested genuine affection. They moved deeper into the party, and Iris navigated it like someone who'd been attending events like this her entire life. She knew when to speak and when to listen, how to make people feel interesting and important, how to gracefully exit conversations that had run their course. More than that, she made Daniel better. When he fumbled a name, she filled in seamlessly. When he struggled for small talk with a senior VP, she asked a question that opened up the conversation. When he started to retreat into himself, overwhelmed by the noise and the performance, she'd touch his arm lightly, anchoring him. "You're doing great," she murmured during a brief moment alone. They were standing at the edge of the ballroom, watching couples drift onto the dance floor as the string quartet shifted to something slower, more romantic. "I'm not doing anything," Daniel said. "You're doing everything. I'm doing my job. You're being yourself. That's exactly what you should be doing. A waiter passed with champagne, and Iris snagged 2 glasses, handing one to Daniel. He took it, though he'd barely touched his first glass and had no intention of drinking more. Clear head, steady hand, minimum risk of saying something stupid. Do you like this? He asked. The work, I mean, these events. Iris was quiet for a moment, watching the dancers with an expression he couldn't quite read. Sometimes, she finally said, it depends on the client. And me? Am I a good client? She turned to look at him then, really look at him, and something in her gaze made his breath catch. You're different, she said. Different good or different bad? Just different. Before he could ask what she meant, a woman's voice cut through the conversation. Daniel Brooks? Is that really you? Daniel turned to find Vanessa Chen, no relation to Richard, despite the shared surname, advancing on them with the determined smile of someone who'd spotted prey. Vanessa was the company's VP of Business Development, notoriously sharp, politically savvy, and exactly the kind of person Richard had warned him he needed to impress. Vanessa, Daniel said, trying for warm and landing somewhere near panicked. Good to see you. I almost didn't recognize you outside of the office. Vanessa's gaze slid to Iris with frank appraisal. And who is this lovely creature you've been hiding from us? Iris, Daniel said. Vanessa is one of our VPs. Corporate consulting, Iris said, shaking Vanessa's hand. Strategy and optimization. How interesting. Vanessa's smile sharpened. What firm? For the first time all evening, Daniel saw Iris hesitate, just a fraction of a second, but enough to notice. Then she named a consulting firm Daniel vaguely recognized, and Vanessa's expression shifted to something like respect. Really? I worked with them on a project 2 years ago. Brilliant team. Who was your lead then? Was it still Marcus Holloway? Actually, I was in the London office at that time, Iris said smoothly. Different leadership structure, but yes, Marcus is excellent. They talked shop for a few minutes, and Daniel watched Iris handle Vanessa's questions with impressive skill. But something had changed in her demeanor, a subtle tension that hadn't been there before. Vanessa eventually excused herself to greet other arrivals, and Daniel turned to Iris with questions forming on his lips. Before he could ask them, the band shifted to a waltz, and couples began pairing off on the dance floor. Dance with me, Iris said suddenly. It wasn't quite a question. Daniel glanced at the crowded floor, at the couples swaying in practiced motion, and felt panic rise in his throat. I don't really dance, he said. I know, but everyone's watching, and if we don't dance, they're going to think something's wrong. She set down her champagne and extended her hand. Trust me. He didn't trust her. He didn't trust himself. But he took her hand anyway, let her lead him onto the floor, hoped desperately that he wouldn't embarrass them both. Iris stepped into his arms with the confidence of someone who'd done this countless times. She positioned his hands, one on her waist, one holding hers, and began to move, guiding him through steps he didn't know he knew. Just follow my lead, she said softly. Don't think, just feel the rhythm. It should have been impossible. Daniel hadn't danced since his wedding, hadn't held a woman like this since Sarah, but Iris made it easy. Her movements clear and confident, her body a roadmap he could follow. They swayed together, and the ballroom seemed to narrow to just the space they occupied. The music washed over them. The lights caught in Iris's hair, her eyes, the gold at her throat. This close, Daniel could see the subtle imperfections that made her real. The faint scar above her eyebrow, a small mole near her collarbone, the way her professional mask slipped just slightly when she thought he wasn't looking. You're better at this than you think, she said. I'm following someone who knows what she's doing. Isn't that what you've been doing all night? Yeah. And it's terrifying. Iris laughed, soft and genuine, and for a moment she looked younger, less guarded. At least you're honest about it. Most people pretend they have it all figured out. Do you have it all figured out? Her smile faded. No, not even close. The song ended, bleeding into the next, but they kept dancing. Other couples moved around them, lost in their own worlds, their own performances. Daniel knew he should pull away, thank her, return to the safety of the sidelines. But something kept him there. held in the orbit of this woman who was a stranger and somehow not a stranger at all. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "You can ask. I might not answer." "Why did you hesitate earlier when Vanessa asked about the consulting firm?" Iris's expression shuddered, her professional mask snapping back into place. "I didn't hesitate." "You did, just for a second, like you were deciding how much truth to tell." She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't respond. Then, "Everyone lies at these things, Daniel. Haven't you figured that out yet? The only question is how much and to whom. I'm not lying, not really. I mean, I am about you, about us, but everything else is performance," Iris interrupted gently. "You're performing confidence you don't feel. Success you're not sure you deserve. Comfort in a world you don't quite fit into. That's not technically lying, but it's not exactly truth either." The observation cut deeper than it should have. Daniel felt exposed, seen in a way he hadn't expected, by someone he was paying to pretend she cared. "And you?" he asked. "What are you performing?" Iris's gaze held his, gray-green eyes searching for something he didn't understand. For a moment, he thought she might tell him, really tell him, break through the professional veneer to whatever lay beneath. Then she smiled, and the moment passed. "Exactly what you're paying me for," she said. "The perfect girlfriend, charming, poised, completely devoted to you." She leaned in slightly, her voice dropping. "And you should know, people are watching. We're selling this, they're buying it." She was right. Daniel could feel eyes on them, see colleagues and executives glancing their way with expressions ranging from approval to envy. He was succeeding. This was working. Iris was giving him exactly what he'd hired her for. So why did it feel like losing something he couldn't name? The song ended. They separated, returned to the periphery of the party. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of conversations and champagne and carefully maintained performances. Iris never faltered, never broke character. She was everything she'd promised to be, professional, perfect, entirely convincing. It was after 11 when they finally left, stepping out of the Fairmont into cool autumn air that tasted like rain. The car was waiting. Inside, Daniel loosened his tie and tried to process what had just happened. "You were incredible," he said. "Seriously, I couldn't have done that without you." "That's what you paid me for," Iris said, but her voice lacked the edge from earlier. She sounded tired. "Did you get what you needed?" "I think so." Richard looked pleased. "Vanessa actually engaged with me like a human being. Several executives asked for my card." He ran a hand through his hair. "I'm pretty sure I didn't tank my career, at least." "Then we succeeded." Iris stared out the window at the passing city. "Congratulations." Something in her tone made Daniel look at her more closely. The professional mask was gone, replaced by exhaustion and something that looked almost like sadness. "Are you okay?" he asked. "Fine. Just tired. These events take it out of you." "I can imagine." "Can you?" She turned to face him, and in the dim light of the car, her face was all shadows and angles. "Can you actually imagine what it's like to spend an entire evening pretending to be someone you're not? To perform affection you don't feel, speak words you don't mean, all while maintaining a smile and perfect posture and never, ever breaking character?" The question hung between them, loaded with something Daniel didn't understand but could feel the weight of. "No," he admitted. "I can't. Not really." Iris nodded, looked away. "Most people can't." They rode in silence the rest of the way. When the car pulled up to Daniel's apartment, he fumbled for his wallet, unsure of the protocol. Did he tip? Pay extra? Thank her and leave? Iris saved him from the awkwardness. "The payment's already processed through the agency," she said. "You're all set." "Right. Of course." He opened the door, paused. "Thank you, really, for everything." "You're welcome." She looked at him then, and her expression was unreadable. "Good luck with everything, Daniel. I hope you get that promotion." It was a dismissal, a professional ending to a professional arrangement. Daniel should have accepted it, stepped out of the car, closed this chapter, and returned to his carefully ordered life. Instead, he heard himself say, "Would you like to get coffee sometime? Just to talk. No performance, no pretending, just coffee." Iris blinked, clearly surprised. "That's not how this works." "I know. But I'd like to, if you would. She studied him for a long moment, and Daniel couldn't tell if she was going to laugh, refuse politely, or tell him he'd fundamentally misunderstood their arrangement. Okay, she said finally. Coffee. No performance. She pulled a card from her clutch, different from the business card she'd given him before, this one with just a name and a number. This is my actual cell. Text me. Before he could respond, she leaned forward to tell the driver her next destination, and Daniel found himself standing on the sidewalk, watching the car pull away, holding a card with a stranger's phone number and no idea what he'd just started. Inside his apartment, the silence felt different than usual. Heavier, charged with possibility and risk in equal measure. Daniel set the card on his kitchen counter, stared at it like it might explode, tried to convince himself to throw it away. He didn't. Instead, he sent a single text. Thank you for tonight, really. The response came 3 minutes later. You're welcome. You did better than you think. Daniel stared at the message, at the simple words that felt like so much more. Then he typed, Coffee this week? 3 dots appeared. Disappeared, appeared again. Thursday, 2 p.m. Same place as before. It's a date, Daniel wrote, then immediately regretted the word choice. But Iris just sent back a simple, see you then. Daniel set down his phone and walked to his daughter's empty room, where her stuffed animals stood guard over her carefully made bed. He thought about the lies he'd told tonight, the performance he'd given, the strange woman who'd played her role perfectly and then offered him something real. He thought about predictability and control and the careful life he'd built to protect himself from chaos. And he wondered what the hell he'd just gotten himself into. Thursday arrived with the weight of inevitability. Daniel had spent the intervening days in a state of controlled distraction, throwing himself into work with renewed focus, while his phone sat on his desk like an unexploded bomb. He'd picked it up a dozen times, drafted messages he never sent, questioned every decision that had led him to suggest coffee with a woman he'd hired to pretend to like him. Emma noticed his distraction over breakfast that morning. You keep looking at your phone, she observed, dragging her spoon through her cereal with the careful attention of someone conducting a scientific experiment. Just checking messages, Daniel said, which was technically true if you counted staring at an unchanging screen as checking. Is it the lady from the work party? Daniel's head snapped up. What makes you think there's a lady? Emma rolled her eyes with the exasperation of a much older soul trapped in a 6-year-old body. Mrs. Chen told Daddy, Richard told her you brought someone, and you've been doing your thinking face all week. My thinking face? The one where you look worried and happy at the same time, like when you're trying to surprise me but you're not sure if I'll like it. Out of the mouths of babes, Daniel thought. His daughter was terrifyingly perceptive. It's nothing, sweetheart, just meeting someone for coffee. A date? Emma's eyes went wide. Not a date, just coffee. That's what dates are, Daddy. Coffee and talking. Daniel opened his mouth to argue, realized he had no counterargument, and closed it again. When had his daughter become an expert on dating? It's complicated, he said finally. Everything's complicated with you. Emma finished her cereal and carried her bowl to the sink with exaggerated care. At the doorway, she paused. Mrs. Chen says you deserve to be happy. I am happy. Different happy, the kind with another person. She disappeared down the hallway before he could respond, leaving Daniel alone with his coffee and his thoughts, and the uncomfortable truth that even a 6-year-old could see through his carefully constructed defenses. By the time 1:45 rolled around, Daniel had changed his shirt twice, checked his hair 3 times, and seriously considered texting Iris to cancel. He didn't. Instead, he left work early with a vague excuse about a dentist appointment and walked to the Cambridge Cafe through autumn air that felt too crisp, too clear, like the city was holding its breath. Iris was already there when he arrived, sitting at the same corner table they'd occupied 2 weeks ago. But everything else was different. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, her hair down, no makeup that he could detect. She looked younger, softer, more accessible, more real. She saw him and smiled, small and almost shy, nothing like the confident woman who'd navigated the gala with such ease. Hi, Daniel said, sliding into the seat across from her. Hi. Iris wrapped her hands around her coffee cup like she was cold, though the cafe was warm. I wasn't sure you'd actually come. I wasn't sure you'd actually come. Seems we both showed up despite our better judgment. Daniel laughed, some of the tension in his shoulders easing. Coffee? Already got one. But thank you. They sat in awkward silence for a moment. Two people who'd performed intimacy for strangers now struggling with genuine interaction. Daniel searched for words, found none adequate, settled for honesty. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. Do what? This. Whatever this is. You were hired to pretend to be my girlfriend. Now we're having coffee. I don't know the rules anymore. Iris studied him with those gray-green eyes that seemed to shift color with the light. There are no rules. We're just two people having coffee, that's all. Is it? I don't know, she said quietly. You tell me. Daniel thought about the easy answers he could give, the safe deflections, the careful lies that would protect both of them from whatever this was becoming. Instead, he said, at the gala, when we were dancing, you asked if I could imagine what it's like to spend an evening pretending to be someone you're not. I've been thinking about that. Have you? Yeah. And I think maybe I do understand, not the way you meant it, but... He paused, choosing words carefully. I spend every day pretending I have it all together, that I know what I'm doing as a father, as a professional, as a human being, that I'm not terrified I'm going to screw up my daughter or my career or both, that the loneliness doesn't eat at me sometimes when Emma's asleep and the apartment's quiet and I realize I haven't had a real conversation with another adult in weeks. Iris was very still, her attention complete. So maybe I can't imagine doing it for money, or doing it as well as you do, Daniel continued. But I understand performing. I understand pretending. I understand building walls to protect yourself from a world that feels too big and too complicated and too likely to hurt you if you let it get too close. The silence that followed felt different than before. Heavier, charged with recognition. You're more perceptive than I gave you credit for, Iris said finally. I'm a father to a 6-year-old girl. You learn to read people or you don't survive. Tell me about her. Emma, right? Daniel felt his expression soften the way it always did when he talked about his daughter. She's everything. Smart, funny, painfully observant. She thinks matching socks are boring and that I need to go on more dates. She said that? Basically, via Mrs. Chen, our neighbor, who's convinced I'm wasting my youth working too much. Are you? Probably. Daniel took a sip of coffee, grateful for something to do with his hands. But I don't know how to be any other way. After Sarah died, that's Emma's mom, I had to figure out how to be both parents. How to keep everything stable and safe and predictable for Emma. There wasn't room for anything else. Including yourself? The question hit harder than it should have. Including myself, Daniel agreed. Iris was quiet for a moment, her fingers tracing patterns on her coffee cup. My mother died when I was 8, she said, her voice careful, measured. Cancer. Fast and brutal. My father shut down afterward. Not dramatically. He still went to work, still paid the bills, still technically took care of me. But emotionally he was gone. Like he'd decided that loving people was too dangerous, so he'd just stop. I'm sorry, Daniel said, inadequate words for a childhood-sized wound. It was a long time ago. Iris looked up, met his eyes. But I understood what you meant about building walls. I learned early that depending on people, letting them in, it just meant more pain when they left. Better to stay controlled, self-contained, safe. Is that why you do this? The escort work? Iris's laugh was sharp, almost bitter. It's not... She stopped, took a breath. It's complicated. Everything's complicated with you, Daniel said, echoing Emma's words from that morning. Fair. Iris set down her cup with deliberate care. The truth is, I don't actually do this. The escort work. I mean, I did. Once. That night with you was my first and only time. Daniel felt the world tilt slightly. What? I hired the agency, not to work for them, to attend events through them, anonymously. They matched me with you by accident, some mix-up in their system. I didn't realize until I showed up and you clearly thought I worked for them. Why didn't you say something? Because you look so nervous and so sincere, and I thought, she paused, choosing words carefully. I thought it might be interesting, to be seen as just a person instead of… She stopped again, shook her head. Never mind. Instead of what? Iris studied him for a long moment, and Daniel could see her weighing something, measuring risk against reward, truth against safety. This is going to sound insane, she said finally. Try me. My full name is Iris Sutton. Daniel waited for the rest of the explanation, the context that would make that name mean something. When Iris continued to watch him with an expression somewhere between amusement and disbelief, he shook his head. Sorry, should I recognize that name? Most people do. She pulled out her phone, typed something, then turned the screen toward him. Daniel found himself staring at a Forbes article. Iris Sutton, the self-made billionaire revolutionizing sustainable tech. The photo showed the woman sitting across from him, but different. Power suit, severe expression, every inch the commanding executive. The article detailed her company, Sutton Innovations, her net worth, north of $2 billion, her reputation as a brilliant, demanding, notoriously private CEO. You're kidding, Daniel said. I wish I were. He read the article twice, his mind struggling to reconcile the woman in the photos with the woman who'd shown up at his door, who'd danced with him, who was currently sitting in a Cambridge cafe looking nervous. You hired an escort agency, Daniel said slowly, so you could attend events anonymously, without being recognized as a billionaire CEO. Yes. And when you showed up and I thought you worked for the agency, you just went with it. Yes. That's insane. I told you it would sound insane. Daniel set the phone down, tried to process what he was hearing. Why would you do that? Why would someone like you need to hide who you are? Iris's smile was sad, tinged with something that looked like exhaustion. Because every interaction I have, every conversation, every relationship, it's all filtered through what I am instead of who I am. People want things from me, access, money, connections, reflected glory. They see the company, the wealth, the power. They don't see me. So you hired an agency to be invisible. To be normal, Iris corrected, even if just for one night. To have a conversation with someone who wasn't trying to sell me something or use me for something or perform for me because of what I could do for them. Daniel thought about the gala, about Iris moving through that room with such confidence, about the way people had deferred to her without quite knowing why. He'd attributed it to her professionalism, her practiced social skills. But it had been more than that. It had been power, real power, leaking through despite her best efforts to hide it. And with me? He asked. I was performing. I hired you specifically to make me look good. You were honest about it, Iris said. You told me exactly what you needed and why. There was no pretense, no hidden agenda. You weren't trying to impress me or use me. You were just a nervous single father trying to navigate a professional requirement. She leaned forward slightly. Do you have any idea how refreshing that was? I'm trying to wrap my head around the fact that I hired a billionaire to be my fake girlfriend. When you put it that way, it does sound particularly absurd. They stared at each other for a moment, then simultaneously started laughing. Not polite social laughter, but genuine, slightly hysterical amusement at the sheer impossibility of the situation they'd stumbled into. This is crazy, Daniel said when he could speak again. Completely crazy, Iris agreed. So what now? The laughter faded. Iris's expression grew serious. I don't know. I've never done this before. Done what? Gone to coffee with someone who thought you were an escort? Been honest with someone about who I am. Let someone see past the performance to whatever's underneath. Daniel understood that feeling, the vertigo of vulnerability, the terror of being truly seen. We could just keep doing this, he suggested. Having coffee, talking, no performance, no pretending, just two people who understand what it's like to build walls for survival. No expectations, Iris asked. No expectations. That sounds too simple. Maybe simple is what we both need. Iris considered this, her gaze drifting to the window where afternoon sun painted the street gold. I have to tell you something else, she said. The age thing. I'm 38. At the gala, when I asked if that would bother you, I was testing, seeing if you'd react differently if you thought I was older, less what? Desirable? Appropriate? Daniel shook his head. I'm 34. 4 years isn't exactly scandalous, and honestly, after what I've been through, age is the least interesting thing about a person. What is the most interesting thing? Daniel thought about it. Whether they're kind, whether they're honest, whether they can look at their own life and see it clearly, flaws and all, and still show up anyway. That's a high bar. Yeah, but I think you clear it. Iris smiled, and this time it reached her eyes, softened the careful control she wore like armor. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone easier to categorize, to understand, to keep at arm's length. She picked up her coffee, realized it had gone cold, set it down again. You scare me a little. I scare you? You're a billionaire CEO who runs a tech company. I write code and pack school lunches. That's exactly why you scare me. You're real, grounded. You have this life, this daughter, this world that's completely separate from the performance I've been giving for years. You don't want anything from me except honest conversation. I don't know how to process that. Daniel reached across the table, not quite touching her hand, but close enough that the intent was clear. We can figure it out together, if you want. I don't do relationships, Iris said quickly. I don't have time. I don't have the emotional bandwidth, and I've seen what happens when you let someone get close enough to hurt you. I don't do relationships either. I have a 6-year-old who's my entire world and a life that's carefully structured to avoid exactly this kind of complication. So we're both terrible candidates for whatever this is. Absolutely terrible. They sat with that truth between them. The acknowledgement of all the reasons this shouldn't work, couldn't work, would almost certainly end badly for both of them. Coffee next week? Iris asked. Yeah, Daniel said. Coffee next week. They stood, gathered their things. At the door, Iris paused. Thank you, she said, for not treating me differently. After finding out. Thank you for trusting me enough to tell me. She nodded, then surprised him by leaning in and pressing a quick kiss to his cheek. It was brief, barely a whisper of contact, but it sent electricity through him in a way nothing had in years. See you next week, Daniel Brooks, she said, and walked out into the afternoon sun. Daniel stood in the doorway, touching his cheek where she'd kissed him, wondering what the hell he was doing and knowing he was going to do it anyway. The week that followed established a pattern. They texted, short messages at first, carefully casual, then longer as they grew more comfortable. Iris told him about board meetings that exhausted her, investors who missed the point, the strange loneliness of making decisions that affected thousands of people's livelihoods. Daniel told her about Emma's latest school drama, code that refused to compile, the particular joy of watching his daughter discover something new. They didn't talk about the future, didn't define what this was or where it might go. It existed in a bubble separate from both their lives, a space where a single father and a billionaire CEO could just be two people getting to know each other. Their second coffee date lasted 3 hours. The third stretched into dinner, then a walk along the Charles River as evening painted the sky in shades of amber and rose. Iris told him about building her company from nothing, about the isolation of success, about looking at her life and wondering if she'd traded everything meaningful for power she'd never really wanted. Daniel told her about Sarah, about grief that never quite went away, but learned to coexist with joy, about the terror of single parenthood and the unexpected beauty of watching a small human grow. Do you ever regret it? Iris asked as they walked. Putting your career on hold to raise Emma? Never, Daniel said without hesitation. She's the best thing I've ever done. The only thing I'm certain I got right. You're a good father. I'm a terrified father who's making it up as I go along. Same thing, basically. On their fourth meeting, Iris asked about his work, really asked, and Daniel found himself explaining code architecture with a passion he usually reserved for conversations with other developers. Iris listened with genuine interest, asked smart questions, made connections he hadn't considered. You love it, she observed. The work itself, not the career advancement or the recognition. just the pure problem solving. Is that weird? It's honest. Most people can't separate what they do from what they want others to think about them doing it. You sound like you're speaking from experience. Iris was quiet for a moment. I built my company because I saw a problem that needed solving. Sustainable technology that was actually accessible, actually practical, not just virtue signaling for wealthy consumers. But somewhere along the way, it became about the company, the growth, the market share. I lost track of why I started. Do you want to go back? To the beginning, I mean? The purity of the problem solving. I don't know if I can. There are too many people depending on me now, too many commitments, too much infrastructure. I'm not just solving problems anymore. I'm managing a machine. Daniel heard the exhaustion in her voice, the weight of expectations she carried. What would you do if you could do anything? If none of that existed? Iris considered the question seriously. I'd fund research, quietly, without headlines or press releases. Find brilliant people working on important problems and give them resources to solve them. No corporate oversight, no investor demands, just pure innovation. That sounds amazing. That sounds impossible. I have a board, shareholders, quarterly earnings calls. I can't just walk away. I didn't say walk away. I said, what would you do if you could? Daniel stopped walking, turned to face her. You've built something incredible, but maybe you've also built a cage. The words landed between them with the weight of truth recognized. Iris stared at him, and in the fading light, her eyes looked more gray than green, storm clouds gathering. You see too much, she said quietly. You show too much. When you let yourself. She stepped closer, and Daniel's breath caught. They'd been carefully maintaining distance, keeping physical contact minimal, safely casual. But now Iris was close enough that he could smell her perfume, see the gold flecks in her eyes, feel the warmth of her presence. This is a bad idea, she said. Terrible idea. You have a daughter, a carefully ordered life. I have a company, responsibilities, a public profile that would make any relationship complicated at best. I know. We've known each other less than a month. 4 coffee dates doesn't make a foundation. I know that too. So why does this feel like the most honest thing I've done in years? Daniel didn't have an answer. He just knew that standing here with Iris in the cool October evening with the river flowing beside them and the city glowing in the distance, he felt more present, more alive, more himself than he had since Sarah died. I should go, Iris said, but she didn't move. Yeah, Daniel agreed, but he didn't step back. They stood like that for a long moment, balanced on the edge of something neither quite dared to name. Then Iris's phone buzzed, shattering the moment. She checked it, and her expression shifted to something more guarded. Emergency meeting, she said. Something with the European division. I have to go, of course. Do what you need to do. Iris nodded, but she looked reluctant, torn between duty and desire in a way Daniel understood intimately. Same time next week? I'll be here. She smiled, touched his arm briefly, just a whisper of contact that somehow meant everything, and walked away. Daniel watched her go, watched her pull out her phone and transform back into the CEO, the billionaire, the woman who commanded boardrooms and made decisions that affected thousands of lives. He walked home through streets growing dark, thinking about cages and walls and the risks of letting someone pass the defenses you'd built for survival. His phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Chen, asking if he could pick up Emma from her place. Another from Richard about a Monday morning meeting. The mundane demands of his real life, pulling him back from wherever he'd been with Iris. But when he picked up Emma, she took one look at his face and said, "You saw the lady again." What makes you say that? You have your happy face, the real one, not the pretend one. Daniel pulled her into a hug, breathing in strawberry shampoo and innocence. How did you get so smart? Good genetics, Emma said, matter-of-factly. Is she nice? Very nice. Good. You deserve nice. She paused. Can I meet her? The question hit Daniel like a physical blow. He'd been so careful to keep these worlds separate, his life with Emma, his strange new connection with Iris. The thought of bringing them together felt simultaneously right and terrifying. Maybe, he said carefully. Someday. If we keep seeing each other. Okay, Emma seemed satisfied with this answer. Mrs. Chen says you should bring her to dinner. She wants to, what did she call it? Assess her suitability. Of course she does. That night, after Emma was asleep, Daniel's phone lit up with a text from Iris. I can't stop thinking about you. His heart hammered as he typed back. Same. This is going to get complicated. It already is. Are you scared? Daniel thought about his daughter sleeping down the hall, about the carefully ordered life he'd built, about all the ways letting Iris in could shatter the fragile equilibrium he'd maintained for 3 years. Terrified, he wrote, but I don't want to stop. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Good, Iris wrote, because neither do I. Can I ask you something? Anything. When you're with me, is it real or are you still performing? The question hung in the digital space between them. Daniel waited, watching the screen, wondering if he'd pushed too far, asked too much. Finally, Iris's response came. At first, I didn't know. I'm so used to performing that I couldn't tell the difference anymore. But somewhere between the second coffee and tonight, it became real. Terrifyingly, vulnerably real. I'm not performing anymore, Daniel. I'm not sure I know how to perform with you. Daniel read the message 3 times, his chest tight with something he didn't have words for. That's the scariest thing anyone's ever said to me, he wrote back. Good scary or bad scary? I'll let you know when I figure it out. A laughing emoji appeared, then, fair. Sleep well, Daniel Brooks. You too, Iris Sutton. He set down his phone and lay in the darkness, listening to the sounds of his apartment, the heating system clicking on, Emma's soft breathing from down the hall, the distant sounds of the city outside his window. This was his life, safe and predictable and entirely under his control. And he was about to risk all of it for a woman he barely knew. The thought should have sent him spiraling into panic. Instead, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Anticipation. The sense that something new was beginning. Something he hadn't planned or structured or carefully risk-assessed. Something that might actually be worth the chaos it would inevitably bring. Their 5th meeting happened at an art museum on a Sunday afternoon. Emma was with Mrs. Chen, and Daniel had the day free. A rare luxury he usually spent catching up on work or household tasks. Instead, he found himself standing in front of a Rothko painting with Iris beside him, both of them quiet in the presence of color and light. I love how abstract it is, Iris said softly. How it doesn't try to be anything except what it is. No pretense, no performance, just pure emotion made visible. That's how I feel about good code, Daniel said, when it's elegant and efficient and does exactly what it's meant to do without unnecessary complexity. Iris turned to look at him, a smile playing at her lips. Did you just compare Mark Rothko to computer programming? I might have. That's either brilliant or deeply weird. Can it be both? They moved through the galleries, sometimes talking, sometimes just existing in comfortable silence. Daniel found himself studying Iris as much as the art, watching the way she moved through space, the small gestures that revealed her inner state, the way she touched her necklace when uncertain, how she tilted her head when truly interested in something. In front of a sculpture, twisted metal that somehow suggested both violence and grace, Iris said, I need to tell you something. Daniel's stomach dropped. Here it comes, he thought. The revelation that would end this before it really began. She was moving away, getting back with an X, realized this was a mistake. Okay, he said, keeping his voice steady. Next week, there's a tech conference in San Francisco, major industry event. I have to go. I'm giving the keynote. It's 3 days. That's okay. We can skip our coffee date. Do it when you get back. I want you to come with me. Daniel blinked. What? To San Francisco, to the conference. Iris turned to face him fully. I know it's crazy. We've known each other a month, but I'm going to be surrounded by people performing, by investors and competitors and journalists, and I'd like to have one person there who sees me as just Iris. Not the CEO, not the billionaire, just me. Iris, I can't just fly to San Francisco on a whim. I have Emma. I have work. I know. And if you can't, I completely understand. But I have a plane. It would cost you nothing, and you could work remotely for 3 days, couldn't you? Bring Emma if you want. I'll set you up in a suite, give you space, no pressure to attend any of the conference events unless you want to. She paused. I'm asking because I want you there. Not because I need arm candy or a fake boyfriend. Because being around you makes me feel less alone. The honesty of it disarmed him completely. Daniel thought about logistics, about Emma's school, about the insanity of flying across the country with a woman he'd known for 4 weeks. Let me think about it, he said. I need to figure out if I can make it work. Iris nodded, and if she was disappointed, she hid it well. They finished walking through the museum, the question hanging between them like the suspended sculptures in the modern art wing. That evening, Daniel broached the subject carefully with Emma over dinner. How would you feel about taking a little trip, he asked. To San Francisco, for a few days. Emma's eyes lit up. Really? When? Next week, Tuesday through Thursday. Would the lady be there? The one you keep having coffee with? Daniel's carefully crafted approach crumbled. How do you know about that? Daddy, you're not subtle. You check your phone all the time now, and you smile at it. It's very obvious. When had his daughter become a detective? Yes, he admitted. She'd be there. She has to go for work, and she thought maybe we'd like to come along. You'd miss school for 2 days, but we could make it educational. Museums, aquarium, the Golden Gate Bridge. Emma studied him with an expression far too knowing for her age. Do you like her? Like really like her? There was no point in lying to someone who could read him this well. Yeah, sweetheart, I really like her. Does she like you? I think so. Good. Emma returned her attention to her dinner. Can we go to the sea lions? Mrs. Chen says there are sea lions at Fisherman's Wharf and they're very loud. Just like that, it was decided. Daniel texted Iris that night. We're in. Emma wants to see the sea lions. The response was immediate. Perfect. I'll have my assistant arrange everything. And Daniel? Yeah? Thank you for taking a chance on this. Thank you for asking. The next few days passed in a flurry of preparation. Iris's assistant, a terrifyingly efficient woman named Patricia, sent detailed itineraries, confirmation numbers, packing suggestions. A car service would pick them up Tuesday morning. The flight would be 3 hours. They'd have a 2-bedroom suite at the Fairmont with a view of the bay. Everything handled, everything arranged. Nothing for Daniel to worry about, except the growing realization that he was letting Iris into his real life, his world with Emma, the carefully protected space he'd built for just the two of them. The night before they left, Emma couldn't sleep. She appeared in his doorway at 10 p.m., clutching her rabbit. What if she doesn't like me? Emma asked. Daniel pulled back his covers, and she climbed in beside him, small and warm and worried. Why wouldn't she like you? What if I'm not what she expects? What if I say something wrong or do something weird and she decides you're too complicated? The fear in her voice broke his heart. Emma, listen to me. Anyone who can't see how amazing you are doesn't deserve to be in our lives. Okay? Iris asked me to bring you specifically because she wants to meet you. She knows you're the most important person in my world. Promise? Promise. Emma was quiet for a moment, then, is she going to be like a new mom? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with hope and fear and the particular pain of a child who'd lost her mother too young. I don't know, Daniel said honestly. It's still really new. We're still figuring out what this is, but whatever happens, you and me, we're a team. Nothing changes that. Okay. Emma snuggled closer. I hope she likes sea lions. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. Tuesday morning arrived bright and clear. The car service pulled up at 7 a.m. sharp, a sleek black SUV that made their neighbors stare. Emma was vibrating with excitement, her overnight bag packed with enough stuffed animals and books to supply a small library. The airport was a revelation. Daniel had expected commercial check-in, security lines, the usual chaos of air travel. Instead, they were driven directly to a private terminal where a jet waited on the tarmac. Stairs lowered in invitation. Holy cow, Emma breathed. Is that ours? Not ours, Daniel corrected. Iris's. But Emma had already spotted the woman standing at the base of the stairs, and her attention shifted completely. Iris wore jeans and a cashmere sweater, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked nothing like the polished CEO from the Forbes article, and everything like someone who might actually belong in their lives. When she saw them, her smile was genuine, warm, tinged with nervousness that Daniel found strangely reassuring. "You must be Emma," Iris said, crouching down to the girl's eye level. "I've heard so much about you." Emma studied her with the intensity of a child determining friend or foe. "Do you like sea lions?" "I love sea lions. They're loud and ridiculous and completely themselves. Best kind of animal." Emma beamed, and just like that, the tension shattered. "Can I see the plane?" "Absolutely. Come on." Daniel watched them walk up the stairs together, Iris answering Emma's rapid-fire questions with patience and genuine interest, and felt something in his chest loosen. Whatever this was, whatever it might become, watching these two parts of his life come together felt right in a way he hadn't anticipated. The flight was smooth, comfortable in ways that commercial travel had never been. Emma was entranced by everything: the leather seats, the flight attendant who brought her apple juice in actual glassware, the fact that she could walk around whenever she wanted. Iris settled into work mode, her laptop open, but she kept glancing over at Emma with an expression Daniel couldn't quite read. Halfway through the flight, Emma migrated to the seat next to Iris. "Can I ask you something?" Emma said, her voice carrying that particular tone of a child about to ask something profound. "Of course. Why do you like my dad?" Iris glanced at Daniel, who was trying very hard to pretend he wasn't listening. "That's a very good question," she said seriously. "Your dad is kind. He's honest even when it's hard to be honest. He's smart in ways that don't need to show off. And he loves you so much it shows in everything he does. Those are all very good reasons to like someone." Emma considered this. "He works too much." "Some people work too much because they're avoiding life. I think your dad works hard because he's trying to build a good life for you." "Are you going to make him happy? Different happy, I mean. Not just dad happy." The question stopped Iris mid-keystroke. She closed her laptop, giving Emma her full attention. "I'm going to try," she said quietly. "If he'll let me. And if you'll let me." "Okay," Emma said, as if that settled everything. "Can I draw on your computer paper?" "Sure, let me get you some blank pages." Daniel watched this exchange with his heart in his throat, amazed at his daughter's directness, grateful for Iris's honesty. When Emma was absorbed in drawing and Iris returned to her work, Daniel moved to sit beside her. "She's incredible," Iris said softly. "You've done an amazing job with her." "She's mostly Sarah's work. I'm just trying not to mess it up." "I think you're doing more than that." Iris's hand found his, fingers interlacing in a gesture that felt both new and ancient. "Thank you for bringing her, for trusting me with this part of your life. Thank you for wanting to be trusted with it." They landed in San Francisco to sunshine and unseasonable warmth. The city spread out below them as they descended, the bay glittering, the Golden Gate Bridge spanning the water in perfect rust-red geometry. Emma pressed her face to the window, enchanted. The hotel suite was ridiculous. 2 massive bedrooms, a living area larger than Daniel's entire apartment, floor-to-ceiling windows with views that made Emma gasp. Iris showed them around, pointing out amenities, giving them space to settle in. "I have meetings most of the day tomorrow," she said, "but my assistant arranged for a car and driver if you want to do tourist things. Thursday evening is the keynote and the gala. I'd love if you could come to that, but no pressure. Just be here when I get back each night." "We will be," Daniel promised. Iris hesitated at the door. "Emma, can I show you and your dad something before I head to my meeting?" She led them to the balcony where the city spread out before them in golden afternoon light. Emma immediately spotted the sea lions at Pier 39, their barking audible even from this distance. "Tomorrow, before my meetings start, I thought maybe we could go see them together," Iris said. "If you want." Emma's face lit up. "Really? Really? I'll clear my morning. Sea lions are important." As Iris left for her evening obligations, Emma turned to Daniel with satisfaction. "I like her, Daddy. She understands priorities." Daniel laughed, pulled his daughter close, and looked out at the unfamiliar city with its promise of possibility and risk balanced in equal measure. "Yeah, sweetheart," he said, "I like her too." The sea lions were exactly as advertised, loud, ungraceful, and utterly captivating. Emma stood at the railing of Pier 39, her face alight with wonder as the massive creatures bellowed and jostled for space on the floating docks below. Iris stood beside her, pointing out the largest male, explaining the social hierarchy with the kind of detail that suggested she'd actually researched this before bringing them here. Daniel hung back slightly, watching the two of them together. The morning sun caught in Iris's dark hair, and when she laughed at something Emma said, the sound was unguarded, genuine. This was a version of Iris he'd never seen, relaxed, playful, present in a way that had nothing to do with corporate strategy or social performance. "That one's the boss," Emma declared, pointing to a particularly large sea lion who'd just shouldered two smaller ones off the dock. "He's like you, Iris, big and in charge." Iris raised an eyebrow. "Should I be flattered or concerned by that comparison?" "Flattered. You're both impressive." Emma said it with such matter-of-fact confidence that both adults laughed. They spent the morning exploring the wharf, eating sourdough bread bowls filled with clam chowder, watching street performers, being aggressively normal tourists. Iris had her phone on silent, and when it buzzed occasionally, she ignored it with visible effort. Daniel noticed the discipline it took, the way she'd glance at the screen, see another message from Patricia or a board member, and deliberately set it aside. "You're going to pay for this later," Daniel observed when Emma ran ahead to look at a puppet show. "All those ignored messages." "Worth it," Iris said simply. She slipped her hand into his, the gesture casual but significant. They were in public, visible, real. Not performing for a gala crowd, but choosing this connection in broad daylight. "I can't remember the last time I did something just because I wanted to. No agenda, no strategic value, just living." "How does it feel?" "Terrifying." She smiled. "And wonderful." By noon, Iris had to leave for her first meeting. She crouched down to hug Emma goodbye, and Daniel saw his daughter's arms wrap around this woman who was still essentially a stranger, saw the way Iris closed her eyes briefly, as if memorizing the moment. "See you tonight," Iris said to both of them. "The driver will take you anywhere you want to go. Museum, aquarium, Alcatraz." Patricia loaded suggestions onto your phone. "We'll be fine," Daniel assured her. "Go be brilliant and terrifying." "Those aren't mutually exclusive?" "With you?" "Definitely not." Iris kissed his cheek, quick and sweet, before she could second-guess herself. Then she was gone, disappearing into a waiting car, transforming back into the CEO as the door closed behind her. Emma watched the car pull away, then looked up at Daniel with knowing eyes. "You love her." The words hit like a physical blow. "Emma, it's too soon to—" "It's not a bad thing, Daddy. I'm just saying what's true." She took his hand, squeezed it. "Mommy would like her." Daniel's throat tightened. They didn't talk about Sarah often. It hurt too much, even after 3 years. But when Emma brought her up, it was always with this same calm certainty, as if her mother were simply away on a trip, watching from somewhere close by. "You think so?" "Yeah. Mommy liked people who were smart and brave and didn't pretend to be something they weren't. Iris is all those things." Emma paused, considering. "Plus she knows about sea lion social structures. That's very important." They spent the afternoon at the Exploratorium, Emma racing from exhibit to exhibit with infectious enthusiasm. Daniel tried to focus on the science, the wonder, the time with his daughter, but his mind kept drifting back to Iris, to the way she'd looked at Emma that morning, to the careful hope in her eyes when she'd asked them to come on this trip, to the growing certainty that whatever this was, it had already moved far past casual coffee dates. His phone buzzed with a text from Iris. "How's the exploring going? Emma's discovered the fog tornado exhibit. I think we might live here now. There are worse fates." "How are you holding up?" "Good. Missing you. Which is weird since we just saw you this morning." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "Not weird. I keep checking my phone hoping you've texted. Patricia thinks I'm having a breakdown." "Maybe you are. Maybe we both are. If this is a breakdown, it's the best one I've ever had." Daniel smiled at his phone, then looked up to find Emma watching him with a knowing expression. "Still not subtle, Daddy," she said. That evening, Iris returned to the suite at 7, exhausted and visibly drained. She'd changed from her power suit into jeans and a sweater, but the corporate mask hadn't quite come off yet. Daniel could see it in the tension of her shoulders, the careful control of her expression. Emma, perceptive as always, went straight to her room to work on a puzzle, giving them space. "Rough day?" Daniel asked, handing Iris a glass of wine he'd ordered from room service. "Brutal. 3 hours of board members questioning every strategic decision I've made in the last quarter, followed by interviews with reporters who want to know why I'm not married, why I don't have children, whether being a woman in tech is still difficult, or if we're past all that now." She took a long drink. "I wanted to tell them that being a woman in tech isn't the hard part. Being a human in corporate spaces where everyone expects you to be a perfectly packaged product, that's the hard part." "But you didn't." "Of course not. I smiled and gave them the sound bites they wanted and performed the role I've been playing for a decade." She set down the wine, rubbed her eyes. "God, I'm tired of performing." Daniel moved to stand behind her, hesitated, then gently placed his hands on her shoulders. When she didn't pull away, he applied gentle pressure, working at the knots of tension. Iris made a sound somewhere between a groan and a sigh. "You don't have to perform here," he said quietly. "Not with us." "I don't know how not to anymore. It's become so automatic I can't find the switch to turn it off." "Then don't try. Just sit here. Let me do this. Stop thinking about what you should be feeling or how you should act and just be." Iris was quiet for a long moment, her breathing gradually slowing, her shoulders dropping under his hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was small, vulnerable in a way he'd never heard. "At the board meeting today, someone suggested I should get married, said it would be good for the company's image, make me seem more stable, more relatable to traditional investors." She laughed, bitter and sharp. "As if my personal life is just another strategic asset to be optimized." Daniel's hands stilled. "What did you say?" "I told them my personal life wasn't up for discussion, that I was here to talk about quarterly earnings, not my relationship status." She turned to face him. "But the thing is, Daniel, I've been thinking about it, about you, about Emma, about what it would mean to actually let this be real, instead of just another thing I'm managing on the side. And it terrifies me. Because relationships require vulnerability, and vulnerability means giving someone the power to hurt you. I've built my entire life around never being that exposed again." Daniel sat down beside her on the couch, their knees touching. "I'm scared too. I haven't let anyone close since Sarah died. I've been telling myself it's about protecting Emma, keeping our life stable and predictable. But really, I think I've been protecting myself. Because losing Sarah almost destroyed me, and I don't know if I could survive that kind of pain again. So what do we do? Keep having coffee dates and pretending this isn't becoming something bigger?" "I think it's already something bigger. Has been for a while." Daniel took her hand, traced patterns on her palm. "The question is whether we're brave enough to admit it and see where it goes." Iris studied their joined hands, her expression unreadable. "I have to tell you something else. About why I've been so careful, so controlled." "Okay." "When I was 25, I was engaged. His name was Marcus. He worked at my first startup, brilliant coder, ambitious in all the ways I thought I wanted in a partner." She paused, choosing words carefully. "I thought he loved me. But after the company got acquired for a substantial sum, after I suddenly had money and options and power, things changed. He proposed, I said yes, and I thought I was building a life." Daniel waited, sensing there was more, that this story didn't have a happy ending. 6 months before the wedding, I found out he'd been planning to leverage my connections to start his own company. He'd already pitched investors using my name, my reputation. When I confronted him, he didn't even deny it, just said that's how these things worked, that I should be happy he was ambitious enough to capitalize on opportunities. Iris's voice went flat, emotionless. He never loved me. He loved what I could do for him. "Iris, after that, I decided it was easier to just not engage, to build walls, keep everything professional and transactional. If people wanted to use me, at least I could control the terms. I'd never be that exposed, that vulnerable, that stupid again." "You weren't stupid," Daniel said firmly. "You were trusting. There's a difference." "Is there? Because from where I'm sitting, they got me to the same place." No, stupid means you didn't learn anything. Trusting means you believed the best in someone and got hurt. One is naive, the other is brave. He squeezed her hand. And choosing to trust again after being hurt? That's the bravest thing anyone can do. Iris's eyes were bright, suspiciously shiny. Are you always this wise, or are you just good at saying what I need to hear? I'm a single father to a terrifyingly perceptive 6-year-old. I've had to get good at finding the right words fast. She laughed, watery but genuine, and leaned against him. Daniel wrapped his arm around her shoulders, and they sat like that as the city lights flickered on outside the windows. Two people who'd built careful walls, finding the courage to dismantle them brick by brick. Emma emerged from her room eventually, took one look at them curled together on the couch, and climbed up between them without asking. She fit perfectly in the space they made, her small warmth anchoring them both to something real and immediate. Are you guys dating now? Emma asked, as casually as if she were asking about the weather. Daniel and Iris exchanged glances over her head. Would that be okay with you? Iris asked carefully. If we were? Emma considered this with her characteristic seriousness. I have some questions first. Fair enough, Daniel said. Shoot. Are you going to move away and make Daddy sad? No, Iris said without hesitation. I live in Boston. That's my home. Are you going to be mean to my dad, or make him do things he doesn't want to do? Absolutely not. Your dad is a grown man who makes his own choices. I'm not here to change him or control him. Are you going to try to be my new mom? This question hung heavier than the others. Iris was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice was gentle, honest. No, sweetheart. You have a mom. She's gone, but she'll always be your mom. Nothing changes that. She touched Emma's hair softly. But if you'd let me, I'd really like to be your friend. Someone who cares about you and wants good things for you. Is that okay? Emma studied her with those disconcerting eyes, weighing truth against intention. Finally, she nodded. Okay, you can date Daddy, but if you hurt him, I'm going to be very disappointed in you. That's a fair deal, Iris said solemnly. I'll do my best not to disappoint you. Good. Emma settled back against the couch cushions. Can we watch a movie now? All this serious talking is exhausting. They ordered room service and watched an animated film Emma had seen a dozen times. The kind of comfortable domestic evening that shouldn't have felt revolutionary, but somehow did. Iris asked questions about the plot, even though it was clearly children's entertainment, and Emma explained with the patience of an expert sharing knowledge with an interested novice. Halfway through the movie, Daniel glanced over to find Iris watching Emma with an expression that made his chest tight. There was wonder there, and tenderness, and something that looked like longing for a kind of life she'd convinced herself she couldn't have. Later, after Emma had fallen asleep in her room and they'd retreated to the balcony with glasses of wine, Iris said, "She's remarkable. You've raised someone truly special. We got lucky. She's got Sarah's heart and, thankfully, not too much of my anxiety. I wouldn't mind if she had some of your anxiety. It means you think carefully, consider consequences. That's not a bad trait in a human." Iris leaned against the railing, looking out at the city. Can I tell you something that's going to sound crazy? At this point, I think we're past worrying about sounding crazy. I keep thinking about what my life would look like if I did this differently. If I stepped back from the day-to-day operations, hired someone else to be CEO, focused on the parts of the work I actually care about instead of the parts I'm supposed to care about. She turned to face him. And in those imagined futures, you're there, both of you. I'm coming home to something real instead of an empty apartment and another business dinner. Daniel's heart hammered. That's not crazy. That's just honest about what you want. But wanting something doesn't make it possible. I have obligations, a company, thousands of employees depending on me making the right choices. And those employees would probably benefit from a leader who's fulfilled in her personal life instead of exhausted and isolated. Daniel moved closer. I'm not saying quit tomorrow. I'm saying maybe there's a middle path, one where you can have both. Is there? Because everyone I know who's tried to have both ends up terrible at one or the other or both. Maybe they were trying to do it alone. Maybe partnership is what makes the impossible possible. Iris looked at him for a long moment, and Daniel could see her running calculations, weighing risks, trying to logic her way through something that couldn't be solved with strategy or data. "I'm going to hurt you," she said quietly. "Eventually. I'm going to get consumed by work or say something thoughtless or prioritize the wrong thing at the wrong time. I'm not good at this. At relationships, at being present, at putting someone else's needs ahead of my own. I'm going to hurt you too. I'm going to be overprotective of Emma, or too rigid about routines, or retreat into my head when things get difficult. I'm not good at this either." He took her hands. "But maybe we can be not good at it together. Figure it out as we go." "That's a terrible plan." "You have a better one?" Iris laughed, sharp and surprised. "No, God help me, I don't." She kissed him then, properly kissed him for the first time, and it was nothing like the careful peck on the cheek from before. This was real, hungry, 3 weeks of tension and possibility releasing all at once. Daniel's hands found her waist, pulling her closer, and she made a small sound against his mouth that sent electricity through him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Iris rested her forehead against his. "We're really doing this," she said. "Looks like it." "I'm terrified." "Me too." "Good. At least we're terrified together." They stood like that for a while, wrapped in each other, in the cool San Francisco night. Two people who'd spent years building walls finally allowing themselves to be vulnerable. Eventually, they went inside, settled on opposite ends of the couch, with careful distance between them, both aware that Emma was sleeping just down the hall, and this was still too new, too fragile to push too fast. "Tell me something true," Iris said. "Something you've never told anyone else." Daniel thought about it. "Sometimes, late at night when Emma's asleep, I talk to Sarah. Tell her about our day, ask her what she'd do about whatever parenting crisis I'm facing. I know she can't hear me, that it's just me talking to empty air, but it makes me feel less alone." Iris was quiet, her expression soft. "That's not crazy. That's love that doesn't know how to stop. Your turn. Tell me something true." "I don't actually like being powerful. I like solving problems, building things that matter. But the performance of power, the constant need to project confidence and authority, it exhausts me. Some days I want to walk away from all of it and just exist, without expectations or responsibilities or people constantly wanting things from me." "What stops you?" "Fear, mostly. If I'm not the CEO, not the success story, not the woman who built an empire from nothing, then who am I? I've defined myself by achievement for so long I'm not sure there's anything underneath." Daniel moved closer, took her hand. "There's plenty underneath. I've seen it. The woman who researched sea lions to make my daughter happy, who gets genuinely excited about elegant code, who looks at art like she's trying to decode the universe. That person is more interesting than any CEO could ever be." "You see me differently than most people." "Because most people are only seeing what you show them. I'm seeing what you reveal when you forget to perform." Iris's eyes were bright again, and this time a tear actually fell. She brushed it away impatiently. "I don't cry. I never cry." "Maybe you've just never had a safe place to." She laughed, choked and watery, and moved into his arms. They held each other as the night deepened outside the windows, and Daniel thought about the strangeness of intimacy, how it could develop between two people who'd started as a transaction and evolved into something neither had planned for or knew how to navigate. The next day, Iris had back-to-back meetings from 8 in the morning until 6 at night. Daniel and Emma explored the city, riding cable cars and visiting Chinatown and feeding each other fortune cookies while debating their fortune's accuracy. Emma declared that hers, new adventures await around every corner, was obviously true because they were literally in a new city having adventures. "What's yours say?" she asked Daniel. He cracked open his cookie, read the slip of paper, and felt something shift in his chest. "Great love brings great risk, but greater reward." "That's about Iris," Emma said with absolute certainty. "You think so?" "Obviously. Fortune cookies don't lie, Daddy. Everyone knows that." That evening, Daniel got Emma settled with a movie and room service, then took an Uber to the convention center where Iris was giving her keynote. He'd debated attending, worried about being a distraction or intruding on her professional space, but she'd texted him earlier, "I'd really love to see you in the audience, if you're comfortable with it." The auditorium was massive, packed with hundreds of tech industry professionals. Daniel found a seat in the back, feeling distinctly out of place among the suits and startups. The lights dimmed and a moderator took the stage to introduce Iris. Please welcome Iris Sutton, CEO of Sutton Innovations, and one of the most influential voices in sustainable technology. The applause was thunderous. Iris walked onto the stage and Daniel's breath caught. This was the version of her from the Forbes article. Power suit, severe expression, commanding presence. She owned the stage, owned the room, every inch the billionaire CEO. But then she started speaking, and something shifted. Her talk wasn't the polished corporate speak Daniel had expected. Instead, she talked about failure, about the projects that had crashed and burned, about the loneliness of making decisions that affected thousands of lives. She talked about losing sight of why she'd started, about getting caught in the machine of growth and performance metrics and quarterly earnings. I built my company because I saw a problem that needed solving, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the huge space. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that. I became focused on being successful instead of being useful, on growth instead of impact, on performing the role of CEO instead of actually leading with purpose. The audience was rapt, silent except for the occasional murmur of recognition. Recently, someone asked me what I'd do if I could do anything without constraints, and I realized I couldn't answer that question anymore. I'd become so defined by my role, my company, my public image, that I'd lost track of who I was underneath all that. She paused, and Daniel would swear she was looking right at him, even from the back of the massive auditorium. But I'm trying to remember, trying to find balance between the work that matters and the life that makes the work worthwhile. It's not easy, but I'm learning that maybe that's the point. The struggle to maintain our humanity while pursuing excellence, that's what makes us effective leaders, not just successful ones. The rest of the talk was brilliant, weaving together technical innovation with philosophical questions about purpose and responsibility. When she finished, the applause was even louder than before, people rising to their feet in appreciation, not just for her success, but for her honesty. Daniel waited outside the auditorium as the crowd dispersed, watching tech leaders and journalists swarm Iris with questions and business cards. She handled it with practiced grace, but he could see the exhaustion creeping back in, the mask settling into place. When she finally spotted him, her whole face changed. The professional veneer cracked, and underneath was something raw and real and entirely focused on him. She excused herself from the cluster of executives and made her way over. "You came," she said. "You asked me to. Besides, I wanted to see you in your element. That was incredible, by the way. The honesty, the vulnerability. That took real courage. I kept thinking about what you said, about being brave enough to be seen." She glanced back at the lingering crowd. "I have to do the reception, shake hands, make nice with investors, but after, we'll be waiting. Take your time." Iris kissed him quickly, heedless of the professional crowd around them, a public declaration that this mattered more than appearances or propriety. Then she was swept back into the world of corporate networking, and Daniel made his way back to the hotel. Emma was already asleep when he arrived, sprawled across her bed with her rabbit clutched tight. Daniel stood in the doorway watching her, thinking about the fortune cookie's prediction, about great love and great risk, and whether he was brave enough for both. His phone buzzed with a text from Iris. 2 more hours of this and then I'm free. Thank you for being there tonight. It meant everything. Take your time. We're not going anywhere. That's what scares me most, that you might actually mean that. I do mean it. Then I guess we're both terrified and doing it anyway. Seems to be our pattern." When Iris finally returned to the suite, it was nearly midnight. She looked exhausted, but also lighter, as if something heavy had been set down. She kicked off her heels, hung up her suit jacket, and collapsed onto the couch beside Daniel. "Tell me about your day," she said, something normal and real and completely unrelated to business. So Daniel told her about Emma's theory on fortune cookies, about the cable car conductor who'd let Emma ring the bell, about the dim sum restaurant where they'd ordered things they couldn't identify and loved most of them. Iris listened with her eyes closed, a small smile playing at her lips, and when he finished, she said, "That sounds perfect. Tomorrow's my last day of meetings, and then we're free." Can we do something like that? Just the three of us being normal? Define normal. I don't know. Whatever normal people do. Museums, parks, anything that doesn't involve business cards or elevator pitches. I think we can manage that. Iris opened her eyes, turned to face him. Daniel, I need to tell you something. His stomach dropped at her tone. Okay. After we get back to Boston, my life is going to get crazy. We're launching a new product line. I have investor meetings in 3 different countries. The board is pushing for expansion into markets I'm not sure we're ready for. She took his hand. I'm going to have less time, less availability. There are going to be weeks where I'm traveling more than I'm home. And I need to know if you can handle that, because I can't promise to be the kind of partner who's always present and available. Daniel considered this carefully. Can I ask you something? Is this you warning me about reality, or is this you giving me an out? Because they're different things. Iris looked startled. I don't know. Both, maybe. Then let me be clear. I'm not looking for someone who can be available 24/7. I have Emma, I have work, I have a life that's going to require flexibility from both of us. What I'm looking for is someone who's honest about their limitations, who shows up when they can, and who doesn't perform when they're with me. He squeezed her hand. You're going to travel. I'm going to have parent-teacher conferences and sick days and soccer games. We're going to have to figure out how to make space for each other in already complicated lives. But that doesn't scare me. What would scare me is if you pretended it would be easy. It's not going to be easy. I know, but I think maybe you're worth the complication. Iris's expression crumbled, the careful control finally breaking completely. I don't know how to do this. How to be someone's partner when I've spent a decade being self-sufficient and isolated. Then we'll figure it out together, make mistakes, adjust, try again. That's what relationships are, just 2 imperfect people choosing each other over and over despite the complications. When did you get so wise about relationships? You've been single for 3 years. Exactly. I've had a lot of time to think about what went wrong, what I'd do differently if I ever got another chance. He pulled her close. Turns out, I'm getting that chance. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, Iris's head on his shoulder, the city glowing outside the windows. Eventually, she spoke again, her voice soft. Tomorrow night, after the gala, I want to tell you something about what I'm planning to do. Changes I'm making. She pulled back to look at him. But I need to be sure first. Need to know this is real and not just a moment of clarity that'll fade when I get back to reality. It's real, Daniel said with certainty. How do you know? Because I've spent 3 years running from anything that felt like this. And here I am, in San Francisco with my daughter and a woman I barely know, planning a future I can't even fully imagine yet. I don't do that for moments. I only do that for real. Iris kissed him then, deep and sure, a promise and a question all at once. When they finally pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. Tomorrow, she said, after the gala, I'm going to tell you everything. I'll be ready. Will you? Probably not, but I'll be there anyway. She laughed, genuine and free, and Daniel thought about fortune cookies and great love and risks that might actually be worth taking. Outside the window, San Francisco glittered with possibility, and for the first time in 3 years, Daniel let himself believe in futures that included more than just survival. The morning of the final gala dawned gray and misty, San Francisco wrapped in the kind of fog that made the city feel suspended between earth and sky. Daniel woke to find Emma already up, perched at the window watching the Golden Gate Bridge emerge from the white like something from a dream. It's magic, she whispered when she noticed he was awake. The whole city just appears when the fog moves. He joined her at the window, and together they watched the morning reveal itself in pieces. Somewhere in the city below, Iris was already in meetings, already performing the role of CEO for what she'd promised would be the last full day. Tonight was the gala, and after that, she'd said, everything would change. Daniel had no idea what that meant, but the certainty in her voice when she'd said it had stayed with him through the night. Emma turned from the window with sudden focus. We should do something special for Iris today, before her big party tonight. Like what? I don't know. Something that shows we're thinking about her even when she's at work being important. Emma's face scrunched in concentration, the same expression she got when solving math problems. Can we make her something? Or find her something perfect? The idea settled into Daniel's chest with surprising weight. Yeah, sweetheart, I think that's a great idea. They spent the morning exploring the Mission District, wandering through vintage shops and artisan markets. Emma examined everything with discerning attention, rejecting items that were too fancy or not Iris enough. Daniel watched his daughter curate their search with the seriousness of someone who understood that gifts mattered most when they said something true about the giver and the recipient both. In a small gallery tucked between a cafe and a bookstore, Emma stopped in front of a painting. It was abstract, all deep blues and grays with unexpected flashes of gold breaking through the darkness. Something about it suggested storms clearing, light finding its way through clouds, hope emerging from difficulty. This one, Emma said with absolute conviction, this is Iris. The gallery owner, a woman in her 60s with paint-stained hands, smiled. Your daughter has excellent taste. That's one of my favorite pieces. Why this one? Daniel asked Emma, though he could already see what she saw. The interplay of control and chaos, beauty emerging from constraint. Because she's always hiding the gold parts, Emma said simply. But they're there. We just have to look carefully. The painting wasn't cheap, but it also wasn't the kind of extravagant gift that would make Iris uncomfortable with its implications. Daniel bought it, and the gallery owner wrapped it carefully while Emma supervised, ensuring every fold of paper was perfect. Someone special? The woman asked. Very special, Emma confirmed. She's brave and smart, and she makes my dad happy. Different happy, not just regular happy. The gallery owner's eyes crinkled with understanding. Different happy is the best kind. You hold on to that. They returned to the hotel to find a note from Iris slipped under the door. Meeting's running late. I'm sorry. See you at 6 for the gala? Missing you both. Emma read the note and frowned. She sounds tired. She probably is. Big meetings are exhausting. Then we should definitely give her the painting tonight, to remind her why she does all this hard stuff. Daniel pulled his daughter into a hug, overwhelmed by her emotional intelligence, her capacity for empathy. When did you get so wise? I learned from watching you, Daddy. You're always doing hard stuff for me because you love me. Iris does hard stuff because she wants to help people. It's the same thing, kind of. At 6 o'clock sharp, Daniel and Emma were dressed and ready. Emma wore a navy dress that Sarah had bought her last year, still a bit too big but growing into it. Daniel wore the same black suit from the Boston Gala, the one that had started this whole impossible thing. The painting sat wrapped on the coffee table, waiting. The knock on the door came at 6:15, and when Daniel opened it, his breath caught. Iris wore a dress the color of midnight, simple and elegant in a way that somehow made her look both powerful and vulnerable. Her hair was up, exposing the line of her neck, and she wore the same delicate gold necklace from their first meeting. But it was her expression that stopped him, exhaustion mixed with something that looked almost like fear. Hi, she said, and her voice was rough, uncertain in a way he'd never heard. Hi, he managed. You look incredible. You're kind to lie. She stepped inside, and Emma immediately launched herself at her in a hug that nearly knocked her off balance. We got you something, Emma announced. For after the party, because parties are exhausting, and you need something to remember that people care about you. Iris's eyes went bright, that telltale shine that meant she was fighting tears. Emma, you didn't have to. We wanted to, Emma said firmly, but you can't open it until after. It's a rule. Okay, I'll follow the rule. Iris crouched down to Emma's level. Thank you, both of you, for being here, for understanding why this matters. We know it's important, Emma said seriously, but we're still the most important, right? The question hung in the air, loaded with a child's need for reassurance and an adult's understanding of competing priorities. Iris took Emma's hands in hers. You are absolutely the most important, she said without hesitation. This gala, these people, the business, it all matters. But you two? You matter more. I promise you that. Emma studied her face, measuring truth against words, then nodded with satisfaction. Okay, then let's go to your party. The gala was at a historic venue in Pacific Heights. all marble columns and soaring ceilings, and the kind of old money elegance that made Boston's Fairmont look almost modest. Daniel felt the familiar twist of anxiety as they arrived, but this time Iris's hand found his immediately, anchoring him. "Stay close," she murmured. "I'm going to need you tonight." They entered together, and the room seemed to shift around Iris's presence. Heads turned, conversations paused, people gravitated toward her like she was the sun, and they were planets locked in her orbit. But this time, Daniel understood what he was seeing, not admiration, but appetite. Everyone wanted something from her. Access, investment, endorsement, proximity to power. Iris navigated it with practiced grace, but Daniel could see the toll it took. The way her smile became more fixed as the evening wore on. The careful modulation of her voice as she gave the same polished answers to variations of the same questions. She was performing, and it was costing her. Emma, perceptive as always, stuck close to Iris when she could, a small anchor of authenticity in a sea of performance. Several times, Daniel watched Iris's hand drift down to touch Emma's shoulder, as if reminding herself what was real. "Is she always like this?" Emma whispered to Daniel during a moment when Iris was cornered by a cluster of investors. "Like what?" "Like she's somewhere else. Like the smiling person isn't really her." Daniel looked at his daughter with renewed amazement. "Yeah, sweetheart. I think this is hard for her." "Then why does she do it?" "Because sometimes the things that matter require us to do hard things. But I think she's figuring out how to do them differently." An hour into the gala, a man approached them. Late 50s, expensive suit, the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. He looked at Emma with barely concealed disapproval before addressing Iris. "Iris, wonderful keynote yesterday. I wanted to discuss the acquisition offer we sent over last month. The board is getting impatient for a response." "Marcus, this is hardly the time," Iris started, but the man, Marcus, cut her off. "There's never a good time with you lately. You're distracted, making questionable decisions, pulling back from growth opportunities." His gaze flicked dismissively to Daniel and Emma. "Perhaps you're spreading yourself too thin." Daniel felt Iris stiffen beside him, saw the flash of anger cross her face before she controlled it. But it was Emma who spoke up, her 6-year-old voice cutting through the tension with perfect clarity. "Excuse me, but you're being rude to Iris. My teacher says that's not how we treat people we respect." Marcus looked at Emma like she'd materialized from thin air. "I'm sorry, who—" "This is Emma," Iris said, and her voice was steel wrapped in silk. "And she's right. You are being rude. This conversation is over, Marcus. My assistant will send you our formal response to your acquisition offer tomorrow. Spoiler alert, it's no." She took Emma's hand and Daniel's arm and walked away, leaving Marcus sputtering in their wake. Once they were out of earshot, Iris let out a long breath. "Thank you," she said to Emma. "That was incredibly brave." "He was being mean to you, and to us. That's not okay." "No," Iris agreed. "It's not. And I should have said that clearly from the start instead of trying to be diplomatic." They found a quiet corner near the terrace doors, and Iris visibly tried to shake off the interaction. But Daniel could see it had rattled her, stripped away another layer of the performance she'd been maintaining. "Do you know him?" Daniel asked quietly while Emma was distracted by the ice sculptures. "Unfortunately, Marcus Holloway. He ran the consulting firm I mentioned at the cafe, the one I lied about working for when Vanessa asked." Iris's laugh was bitter. "He's been trying to acquire my company for 2 years, sees it as a trophy, a way to expand his empire. Doesn't care about the mission or the people, just the market share." "The same Marcus from my engagement?" "Yes." Iris's expression hardened. "I told you he was ambitious. Turns out that ambition extends to trying to buy companies he can't control any other way." Daniel felt anger kindle in his chest at the thought of this man trying to leverage Iris's past, her vulnerability, her company. "What are you going to do?" "What I should have done months ago. Tell him definitively no and stop worrying about burning bridges or maintaining diplomatic relationships with people who don't deserve my courtesy." She looked at him, and in her eyes was a determination he'd seen glimpses of but never fully. "I'm done playing nice with people who see me as an asset to acquire instead of a person to respect." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of conversations and networking and carefully maintained appearances. But something had shifted in Iris. She was less yielding, more direct. When people pushed, she pushed back. When they tried to corner her into commitments, she deflected clearly rather than diplomatically. Emma stayed close, and Daniel watched his daughter unconsciously coach Iris in authenticity, asking direct questions, refusing to pretend interest in boring adult talk, insisting on honesty over politeness. And Iris responded, seemed to draw strength from Emma's absolute refusal to perform. By 10 o'clock, Iris had had enough. She found Daniel and Emma near the bar where he'd been getting Emma a Shirley Temple. "Let's go," she said. "I'm done." "You can't just leave your own gala," Daniel said, though he hoped she could. "Watch me." They slipped out a side door, and Iris didn't look back. In the car back to the hotel, she kicked off her heels and pulled the pins from her hair, letting it fall around her shoulders in waves. Emma, exhausted from the late night, fell asleep against Daniel's shoulder. "Thank you," Iris said quietly, "for being there, for Emma standing up for me, for not thinking less of me when you saw how complicated my world is." "Why would I think less of you?" "Because that world, those people, they're part of my life, the politics, the performances, the Marcus Holloways who see everything as a transaction. That comes with me. And I wouldn't blame you for deciding it's too much." Daniel shifted Emma's sleeping weight gently, reached across to take Iris's hand. "That world doesn't define you. It's something you navigate because you have to, not because you want to. I see the difference." "Do you?" "Yeah. I see you with Emma, teaching her about sea lions and listening to her theories about fortune cookies like they're profound wisdom. I see you at the cafe when you think no one's watching and your guard comes down. I see you trying to figure out how to be both powerful and human, both successful and real." He squeezed her hand. "That's who you are. The gala, the performances, that's just the costume you wear to do the work that matters." Iris's eyes were bright again, and this time she let the tears fall. "I'm going to ruin this, I'm going to prioritize work at the wrong time or say something thoughtless or forget something important because I'm drowning in meetings. I'm not good at balance." "Then we'll figure out a new definition of balance, one that works for who we actually are instead of who we think we should be." Back at the hotel, Daniel carried Emma to her room and tucked her in. She stirred enough to mumble, "Did we give Iris the painting yet?" "Not yet, sweetheart. Tomorrow." "'Kay. Tell her I love her." The words were sleep-blurred, unconscious, but they hit Daniel like a freight train. Emma loved Iris. His daughter, who'd been so careful with her heart since losing Sarah, had opened up to this complicated woman who was trying so hard to be worthy of that trust. When he returned to the living area, Iris was standing at the window in her bare feet, the city lights painting her in shades of gold and shadow. She'd changed into leggings and an oversized sweater, all the corporate armor stripped away. "She's asleep," Daniel said. "Good. She must be exhausted." Iris turned from the window. "Daniel, I need to tell you what I decided, what I'm planning to do." He settled onto the couch, and she joined him, curling into the corner with her knees drawn up like she was trying to make herself smaller, less vulnerable. "I'm stepping down as CEO," she said. The words came out fast, like ripping off a bandage. "Not immediately, but within 6 months. I'm going to announce it next week, start the transition process, train my replacement." Daniel felt his world tilt. "Iris, let me finish, please." She took a shaky breath. "I've been thinking about this for months, maybe longer, about how I built something important but somewhere along the way lost sight of why. The company needs a leader who wants to scale, who thrives on the performance, who sees growth as the ultimate goal. That's not me anymore. Maybe it never really was. What will you do?" "What I told you I wanted to do. Fund research, quietly, strategically, supporting innovation without the corporate overhead. I'll keep majority shares in the company. I'm not walking away from my responsibility to employees or investors, but I'm going to reclaim my life." She looked at him with something raw and desperate in her eyes. "I want to have time to figure out what I actually want instead of what I'm supposed to want. Time to be with you and Emma if you'll have me. Time to just exist, without performing, without constantly proving I deserve the space I take up." This is because of us? Daniel asked carefully. Because if you're doing this for me, for Emma, no, yes, both. Iris ran her hands through her hair, frustrated with her own inability to articulate clearly. I'm doing this for me, but you showed me it was possible. You and Emma showed me what a real life looks like, one built around what matters instead of what impresses people. You didn't tell me to change, you just existed, honestly and completely, and it made me realize how exhausted I am of pretending. Daniel processed this, the enormity of what she was saying. Your board is going to lose their minds. Almost certainly. Marcus is going to try to swoop in, convince investors I'm unstable, use this as leverage for his acquisition attempt. She smiled, and there was steel in it. But I'm going to choose my replacement carefully, someone who shares the original vision, who cares about impact over market share, someone who can tell Marcus to go to hell with more authority than I ever could. You've really thought this through. I've thought of little else for weeks. She moved closer, took his hands. But I need to know, is this too much? Too fast? Am I making decisions based on emotion that I'll regret when reality sets in? Daniel thought about his own life, about the careful structures he'd built after Sarah died, about how meeting Iris had shaken all of it loose. I think you're making decisions based on knowing what you actually want for the first time in years. That's not emotion. That's clarity. What if I'm wrong? What if I step down and 6 months from now I realize I made a terrible mistake? Then you'll figure it out. You're brilliant, resourceful, and capable of building something from nothing. If this doesn't work, you'll try something else. He pulled her close. But I think you're not wrong. I think you're finally being honest with yourself about what kind of life you want to live. Iris buried her face in his shoulder, and he felt her shake with silent tears, release, the overwhelming relief of someone who'd been holding themselves together too long, finally allowing themselves to break. He held her through it, one hand stroking her hair, the other wrapped around her back, anchoring her to something solid. When she finally pulled back, her face was blotchy and her eyes were red, and Daniel thought she'd never looked more beautiful. I'm a mess, she said, trying to laugh. You're real. That's different. God, I love you. The words slipped out before she could stop them, and her eyes went wide with shock at her own admission. I didn't mean, I did mean it, but I didn't mean to say it like that, just blurt it out. Daniel kissed her, stopping the spiral of panic with his mouth on hers. When he pulled back, he was smiling. I love you too, he said simply. Probably have for a while now. I was just waiting for the right moment to say it. This is the right moment? Me having a breakdown about my career on a hotel couch in San Francisco? This is the perfect moment, because it's real and honest and exactly what we are. Two imperfect people figuring it out as we go. Iris laughed, genuine and free, and kissed him again. This time it deepened, became something more urgent. Daniel's hands found her waist, pulling her closer, and she made that sound against his mouth that sent electricity through him. Emma's asleep, Iris murmured against his lips. She is. And we're both adults who've been very patient and very careful about not rushing this. We have been. So maybe a crash from Emma's room cut her off, followed by a sleepy, I'm okay. They pulled apart, laughing, foreheads pressed together as the moment dissolved into domesticity and parenting and the reality of their situation. Rain check, Iris said. Definitely a rain check. Daniel went to check on Emma, who'd apparently knocked over her water glass in her sleep, but was otherwise fine. By the time he got her resettled and returned to the living room, Iris was curled on the couch with her eyes closed, exhausted from the day and the performance and the emotional release. He covered her with a blanket, pressed a kiss to her forehead, and went to his own room, his heart full of love and terror and the strange certainty that they were going to make this work somehow. The next morning, their last in San Francisco, they had a lazy breakfast in the suite. Emma presented the wrapped painting to Iris with great ceremony, explaining the selection process and the meaning behind her choice. Iris unwrapped it carefully, and when she saw the painting, blues and grays with unexpected gold breaking through, her expression crumbled in the best way. It's perfect, she said, her voice thick. How did you know? Because you're always hiding the gold parts, Emma said, repeating her observation from the gallery. But they're there. You just have to look carefully. Iris pulled Emma into a hug, holding on tight, and over Emma's shoulder she met Daniel's eyes. In that look was everything they'd said, and everything they hadn't, promises and fears, and the tentative hope that maybe, impossibly, this could actually work. They spent the morning walking along the bay, feeding seagulls and watching boats, and being deliberately, intentionally normal. Iris took pictures of Emma on her phone, laughing at something only they understood, and Daniel thought about how quickly this had all happened, how little time they'd actually spent together, how insane it was to love someone you'd known for barely a month. And yet he did. He loved her, completely, terrifyingly, with the kind of certainty that didn't come from logic but from something deeper, more fundamental. On the flight home, Emma fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted from days of adventure. Daniel and Iris sat across from each other, and she pulled out her tablet. "I'm announcing my resignation on Monday," she said. "I wanted you to see the statement first." Daniel read it carefully. It was honest without being defensive, clear about her reasons without apologizing for them. She framed it as evolution rather than retreat, as choosing to lead in a different way rather than giving up leadership entirely. "It's perfect," he said. "Though the board is still going to panic, let them. I'm done making decisions based on other people's panic." She took the tablet back, set it aside. "Will you be there when I make the announcement? I know it's asking a lot, and you have work, and Emma has school, but I'll be there," Daniel promised. "We both will, if Emma wants to come." "She doesn't have to. She'll want to. She's invested in this now, in you, and I think having her there will remind you why you're doing this when everyone else is telling you you're making a mistake." Iris smiled, took his hand across the small table. "How did I get this lucky? Finding you, finding both of you. You hired the wrong escort service and got matched with a nervous single father instead. Best mistake I ever made." They landed in Boston as evening painted the sky in shades of amber and rose. The city looked different to Daniel now, charged with new possibility. As they drove back to his apartment, Emma woke and looked out the window with satisfaction. "We're home," she announced. "That was a good adventure, but home is still best." "Is it?" Iris asked from the front seat, genuine curiosity in her voice. "Yeah, because home is where people know you and love you anyway. Adventures are fun, but home is important." Daniel caught Iris's eye in the rearview mirror, saw the emotion there. She'd spent so long making a home that was really just an expensive apartment, a place to sleep between performances. Now she was discovering what home actually meant. Not a location, but people who saw you completely and chose you anyway. At his apartment, Daniel helped unload bags while Emma ran inside to tell Mrs. Chen about the sea lions. Iris lingered by the car, suddenly uncertain. "I should go," she said. "Let you get settled, give you space. Or you could come up, have dinner with us. Nothing fancy, just pasta and whatever vegetables Emma will actually eat." "I'd like that." She paused. "Daniel, everything's about to get very complicated. The announcement, the media attention, the board's reaction. People are going to want to know about my personal life, whether there's someone, whether that influenced my decision." "What are you going to tell them?" "The truth. That I fell in love with someone who showed me what actually matters. That I have a real life now, one I want to protect." She looked up at him. "But that means they'll come after you, Emma. They'll dig, speculate, try to paint you as the reason I'm throwing away my company. Can you handle that?" Daniel thought about it honestly. The attention, the scrutiny, the inevitable invasion of privacy that came with being connected to someone like Iris. It should have terrified him. Maybe it did. But he thought about Emma's words. Home is where people know you and love you anyway, and realized he'd already made his choice. "We'll handle it," he said firmly. "Together, as a family." The word hung in the air between them, significant and terrifying and absolutely right. "A family," Iris repeated, testing the word. "I like the sound of that." "So do I." They went inside together, and Daniel made pasta while Iris helped Emma set the table, and Mrs. Chen stayed for dinner because, of course, she did, and it was chaotic and imperfect and more real than any gala or corporate event could ever be. Later, after Emma was asleep and Mrs. Chen had finally left with knowing looks and poorly concealed delight, Iris and Daniel stood in his small kitchen doing dishes like they'd done it 1,000 times before. I'm scared, Iris admitted quietly. Of Monday, of the backlash, of whether I can actually pull this off. You can, and when it gets hard, when you doubt yourself, you call me, or better yet, you come here. This is your home now too, if you want it. It's a one-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood that doesn't even have a Whole Foods. Is that a problem? Not even a little bit. She dried the last plate, set it carefully in the cabinet. I want this, Daniel, this normal, complicated, imperfect life with you and Emma. I want it more than I've wanted anything in years. Then it's yours. We're yours. However this works, whatever it looks like, we'll figure it out. Iris kissed him then, soft and sweet and full of promise. And standing in his small kitchen with dish soap still on his hands and his daughter sleeping down the hall, Daniel thought about the fortune cookie's prediction one more time. Great love brings great risk, but greater reward. He'd found the love. He was taking the risk. And the reward. This woman. This possibility. This chance at a future he'd stopped believing in was worth every moment of fear, every complication, every uncertain step forward into the unknown. Monday morning arrived with the weight of consequence. Daniel woke at 5, unable to sleep, and found Iris already awake in his living room, her laptop open, going over her resignation statement for what was probably the 100th time. She'd spent the night, the first time she'd stayed over, though they'd maintained careful boundaries with Emma just down the hall. Now she sat in the pre-dawn darkness, still in the t-shirt she'd borrowed from him, looking younger and more vulnerable than he'd ever seen her. Second thoughts? He asked quietly, not wanting to wake Emma. Iris looked up, and in the blue light of her screen, her face was all angles and shadows. About 1,000 of them. But not about whether this is right, just about whether I'm strong enough to handle what comes next. Daniel sat beside her, took the laptop gently from her hands, and closed it. You are. And you don't have to be strong alone anymore. The press conference is at 10. The board meeting is at 9. She leaned into him, seeking warmth and reassurance. Marcus is going to make a play. I know him. He's been waiting for me to show weakness, and he's going to spin this as exactly that. Let him try. You're not weak. You're choosing differently. There's a difference. Not everyone will see it that way. The people who matter will. Emma emerged from her room at 6:30, still in her pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes. She took in the scene. Iris and Daniel on the couch, the tension in the air, the laptop closed but clearly significant, and climbed up between them without asking. Today's the big day, she said. It wasn't a question. Today's the big day, Iris confirmed. Are you scared? Terrified. Emma considered this with her characteristic seriousness. Mrs. Chen says being scared means you're doing something important. If you weren't scared, it wouldn't matter. Iris laughed, surprised and genuine. Mrs. Chen is very wise. She also says you should eat breakfast before doing important things. Come on, I'll make toast. They gathered in the small kitchen, and Emma narrated her toast-making process with the gravity of a cooking show host, while Iris and Daniel tried to pretend this was a normal morning. But the tension hummed beneath everything, the awareness that in a few hours, Iris's carefully controlled world was going to explode. At 8 o'clock, Iris reluctantly changed back into her power suit, transformed from the woman who'd made toast with a 6-year-old into the CEO, who was about to walk away from an empire. Daniel watched the metamorphosis with something like grief, understanding that both versions were real, but knowing which one he preferred. I'll see you there? Iris asked, adjusting her collar in the mirror by his door. Front row. We'll be there. She kissed him goodbye, brief and careful, still navigating how to be affectionate in front of Emma. Then she was gone, and Daniel was left with the task of getting his daughter ready for what would either be a triumphant moment or a devastating one. Is Iris going to be okay? Emma asked as they walked to school. I think so, but it's going to be hard for a while. Will people be mean to her? Daniel thought about lying, softening the truth. But Emma deserved honesty. Some people will. They won't understand why she's doing this. They'll think she's giving up or making a mistake. But we know she's not. We know she's not, Daniel confirmed. Emma was quiet for a moment, then said with perfect conviction, "Then we'll just have to remind her when she forgets." The press conference was being held at Sutton Innovation's headquarters, a gleaming building in the Seaport district that spoke to both the company's success and its values: sustainable design, innovative architecture, technology serving humanity. Daniel had never been here before, and walking through the lobby with Emma's hand in his, he felt the full weight of what Iris was walking away from. Patricia, Iris's assistant, met them at the elevator. She was exactly as efficient and terrifying as Daniel had imagined, but her expression softened when she saw Emma. "Ms. Sutton asked me to bring you to the executive conference room. You'll be able to watch the press conference from there, but you won't be visible to the media." She looked at Daniel with something that might have been sympathy or warning. "It's going to get ugly. The board meeting already was." "How bad?" Daniel asked. 3 board members threatened to resign. Marcus Holloway showed up uninvited and tried to force a vote on his acquisition offer. Miss Sutton shut him down, but he's not going to take this quietly. Patricia led them down a hallway lined with photos of the company's innovations: renewable energy solutions, sustainable manufacturing processes, technology that actually seemed designed to help rather than just profit. "She's stronger than they give her credit for, but she's going to need support after this." They were settled in a conference room with a clear view of the atrium below, where press and investors were gathering. Emma climbed onto one of the executive chairs, spinning slightly, taking in the room with wide eyes. "This is where Iris works?" she asked. "Part of where she works," Daniel said. "It's very fancy, but it doesn't look like a place where people have fun." Out of the mouths of babes, Daniel thought. That was exactly the problem, wasn't it? Iris had built something impressive, something important, but somewhere along the way it had stopped being about the work and started being about maintaining the machinery. At exactly 10 o'clock, Iris walked into the atrium. The room quieted immediately, all attention shifting to her. She stood at the podium with perfect posture, every inch the powerful CEO, and for a moment Daniel's heart sank. Maybe she'd changed her mind. Maybe the board had convinced her this was a mistake. Maybe the weight of expectation had proved too heavy. Then Iris began to speak, and her voice was steady, clear, and absolutely certain. 10 years ago, I founded Sutton Innovations because I saw a problem that needed solving. I believed technology could serve humanity instead of just extracting from it. I believed sustainable solutions could be profitable without being predatory. And I believed a company could grow while maintaining its values and its mission. She paused, letting that sink in. I still believe all of those things, which is why, effective in 6 months, I will be stepping down as CEO of Sutton Innovations. The room erupted. Reporters shouted questions. Investors looked panicked. Photographers' cameras flashed like lightning. Iris waited, calm and composed, until the noise subsided enough for her to continue. "This is not a retreat. This is not abandonment. This is evolution. I've spent a decade building this company, and now it needs a leader who can take it into its next phase of growth. That leader is not me." Her voice never wavered. "I'm better suited to what I've always loved most: supporting innovation, funding research, connecting brilliant people with the resources they need to solve important problems. I'll remain majority shareholder and board chair, but the day-to-day operations need someone whose strengths align with where the company needs to go." A reporter shouted over the others, "Is this because of personal reasons? Rumor is you've been in a relationship." Iris's expression didn't change, but Daniel saw her hands grip the podium slightly tighter. "My personal life is exactly that, personal. But I will say this. I've learned recently that success without fulfillment is just a different kind of failure. I've spent 10 years proving I could build something important. Now I want to spend the next 10 years actually living while I do it." Another reporter, "Marcus Holloway claims you're making an emotional decision that will damage shareholder value. Marcus Holloway has been trying to acquire this company for 2 years because he sees it as a trophy, not a mission." Iris's voice was steel now. "He doesn't care about our values or our people. He cares about market share and profit margins. The fact that he's using my resignation to push his agenda tells you everything you need to know about his intentions." In the conference room, Emma whispered, "She's very brave." "Yes, sweetheart, she really is." Iris fielded questions for another 30 minutes, Never defensive, never apologetic, just clear and honest about her reasons and her vision for the company's future. She announced that the board had already approved her replacement, a woman named Dr. Sarah Chen, who'd been leading their sustainability division, someone who understood both the business and the mission. When the press conference finally ended, Iris walked off the stage without looking back. The room dissolved into chaos behind her, reporters trying to get follow-up quotes, investors arguing among themselves, the sound of a carefully constructed image being dismantled in real time. Patricia appeared at the conference room door. "She's asked if you can wait here. She has one more meeting and then she's done." That meeting, Daniel would learn later, was with Marcus Holloway. Iris had requested it herself, a final confrontation with the man who'd tried to use her vulnerability against her. Daniel paced the conference room while Emma drew pictures on the whiteboard, trying not to imagine what was being said, what threats Marcus might be making. When Iris finally appeared 45 minutes later, she looked exhausted but also lighter, like she'd set down something heavy she'd been carrying too long. "How did it go?" Daniel asked. "I told him to go to hell." Iris's smile was fierce. In slightly more professional language, but the message was clear. His acquisition attempt is dead. His attempt to leverage my resignation against me failed. And if he continues to harass the company or spread rumors, I will personally ensure every investor in the tech sector knows exactly what kind of man he is. What did he say? That I was making a mistake, that I'd regret choosing personal happiness over professional success, that I was wasting my potential. She shrugged. The usual script from men who can't imagine a woman making choices for herself. Emma had stopped drawing and was watching this exchange with fascination. "Did you tell him about the sea lions?" Iris blinked. "What?" "The sea lions. How they're loud and ridiculous and completely themselves, and that's what makes them the best kind of animal. You should have told him that." Iris laughed, the tension finally breaking. She crossed the room and pulled Emma into a hug. "You're absolutely right. I should have told him about the sea lions." They left the building through a side entrance to avoid the media still camped out front. Patricia had arranged a car, and as they drove away from the gleaming headquarters, Iris pulled off her heels and unpinned her hair with visible relief. "So that's it," she said. 6 months and I'm free." "How does it feel?" Daniel asked. "Terrifying. Liberating. Like jumping off a cliff and hoping there's water below instead of rocks." She looked out the window at the city passing by. "But mostly right. It feels right." Emma, practical as always, asked, "What happens now?" "Now," Iris said, "I figure out what comes next. I have meetings with foundations I want to fund, research programs I want to support. I need to find an apartment that actually feels like a home instead of a hotel. And I need to figure out how to be in a relationship like a normal person instead of someone who schedules everything 6 weeks in advance." "You could stay with us," Emma offered. "We have a couch." "Emma," Daniel started, but Iris was already shaking her head with a smile. "That's very generous, but I think your dad's apartment is already pretty full with just the two of you. I need my own space." She paused. "Though maybe not in Boston." Daniel's stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I've been thinking about what you said about choosing a quieter city, somewhere I can actually have a life, instead of constantly being recognized, constantly performing." She turned to face him fully. "What would you think about leaving Boston? Not immediately, but eventually. Finding a place where Emma could grow up with more space, where I could work without the constant pressure of being Iris Sutton, billionaire CEO, where we could just be us." The suggestion should have panicked him. Boston was home, familiar, predictable. Emma's school was here, his job, their entire life. But looking at Iris's hopeful, tentative expression, Daniel found himself actually considering it. "Where were you thinking?" he asked carefully. "I don't know, somewhere smaller, less frantic. Maybe Portland or Boulder or even somewhere in Vermont. Somewhere with good schools and mountains and enough distance from the tech industry that I can actually breathe." She took his hand, "But only if you want it. I'm not asking you to uproot your life for me. I'm asking if you'd consider building a new life together, somewhere we both choose instead of just where we ended up." Emma was bouncing in her seat with excitement. "Could we have a yard? Mrs. Chen says yards are important for children and dogs." We're not getting a dog, Daniel said automatically. But we could have a yard where a dog might theoretically live if we decided to get one someday. Iris laughed. I think that could be arranged. Daniel thought about it seriously. The logistics were daunting, finding new jobs, moving Emma to a new school, leaving behind the life they'd built in Boston. But he also thought about what that life actually looked like. Him working too much, Emma in a small apartment with no outdoor space, both of them maintaining routines that were safe but limiting. Let me think about it, he said. Talk to Emma, really talk, when she's not delirious with the possibility of a dog. Figure out what makes sense. Of course. No pressure, no timeline, just a possibility. That evening, after Emma was in bed, Daniel and Iris sat on his couch, with wine and the weight of the day settling around them. The news was already running stories about Iris's resignation, some sympathetic, some skeptical, some openly hostile. They watched a few minutes of CNBC dissecting her decision before Iris turned it off. I knew it would be like this, she said, but knowing and experiencing are different things. Do you regret it? No. Even with the criticism, even with Marcus trying to use this against me, even with half my board thinking I've lost my mind, no, I don't regret it. She leaned against him. But I'm glad I don't have to face the aftermath alone. You're not alone. You have us. For better or worse, you're stuck with us now. Good. Because I've gotten pretty attached to both of you. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, and Daniel thought about futures and possibilities and the strange way life could shift when you least expected it. A month ago, he'd been alone, careful, contained. Now he was in love with a billionaire who was walking away from everything she'd built, considering moving to a new city, navigating the complexity of blending a relationship with single parenthood. It should have terrified him. It did terrify him. But it also felt more real, more alive, more worth the risk than anything had in 3 years. I talked to Emma tonight, he said. Really talked. About you, about us, about what it might mean if we got more serious. Iris tensed slightly. What did she say? She asked if you were going to be her new mom. Daniel felt Iris's sharp intake of breath. I told her that's not how it works, that she has a mom who will always be her mom, and you're someone different, someone new and important in her life, but not a replacement. What did she say to that? She said that's good, because she wants you to be Iris, not a copy of someone else. Then she asked if we could all live together someday, and if you'd help her learn to code, because apparently her teacher said girls can be programmers too, and she wants to make video games. Iris laughed, watery and surprised. She wants me to teach her to code? She wants a lot of things. A yard, a dog, a family that includes you. Daniel turned to face her fully. I want those things too. Not immediately, not rushing into anything, but eventually. If you want them. I want them so much it scares me, Iris admitted. I've spent so long protecting myself from wanting anything personal that actually letting myself have it feels dangerous. Like I'm setting myself up to lose everything. You might lose some things, but you'll gain others. That's how it works. Very philosophical for someone who was hiring an escort 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks ago, I was a different person. You changed me, both of you, you and Emma. You showed me that being careful all the time isn't the same as being alive. Iris kissed him then, deep and sure, and when they finally pulled apart, she said, Stay with me tonight. Actually stay, not just fall asleep on the couch. I want to wake up with you. Emma will understand. She's 6, not stupid. She knows we care about each other. We don't have to hide that from her. So Daniel stayed. They moved to his bedroom, and for the first time since Sarah died, he shared his bed with someone else. It was strange and perfect, and tinged with the particular intimacy of choosing vulnerability with another person. They made love slowly, carefully, learning each other's bodies and boundaries, and afterward Iris cried a little because it had been so long since someone had touched her with tenderness instead of transaction. I'm not good at this, she whispered against his chest, at being soft, at needing someone. You're better at it than you think. You just need practice. Will you be patient with me? When I mess up, when I prioritize wrong, when I forget how to be human instead of corporate. Always. And you'll be patient with me when I'm overprotective or too rigid or can't stop talking to my dead wife like she's still here. always. They fell asleep tangled together, and when Emma crawled into bed with them at 6 the next morning, she just snuggled between them like this was completely normal and natural, which maybe it was. Over the next few months, everything shifted. Iris began the transition process at Sutton Innovations, training Dr. Chen and systematically extracting herself from day-to-day operations. It was harder than she'd expected, letting go of control, trusting someone else with her vision, watching the company evolve in directions she might not have chosen. But it was also liberating, creating space for the work she actually wanted to do. She started a foundation focused on funding underrepresented researchers in sustainable technology. She connected with universities and small startups, providing capital and mentorship without the corporate overhead or the need for immediate returns. She worked from coffee shops in her apartment and sometimes from Daniel's couch while Emma did homework at the kitchen table. The media attention was intense at first, profiles trying to understand her decision, investors questioning her judgment, competitors waiting for her to fail. Marcus Holloway made one more acquisition attempt, which Iris and the board shut down so definitively that he finally retreated, though not without spreading rumors about her mental state and personal life. Daniel and Emma were photographed a few times leaving Iris's apartment or having dinner together. A gossip site ran a story about the single father who convinced a billionaire to give up her empire. Daniel hated the attention, the way they made it sound like he'd manipulated her, but Iris just laughed it off. Let them speculate. They can't touch what's real. Emma handled the attention with surprising grace, telling her classmates matter-of-factly that, yes, her dad was dating someone, and no, it wasn't weird that she was rich, and could everyone please stop asking because it was getting boring. By spring, they'd made the decision together. They would leave Boston. Emma had enthusiastically approved, especially when they'd included her in looking at houses online, searching for places with yards and good schools and enough space for all of them. They settled on Portland, Maine, close enough to Boston for visits, far enough for real distance, small enough to feel manageable while still having culture and opportunity. Iris bought a house, not a mansion, but a comfortable craftsman with a yard and a front porch and enough bedrooms for everyone to have their own space. Daniel gave notice at his job and found a remote position that would let him work from anywhere. Emma said goodbye to her classmates and Mrs. Chen with tears and promises to visit. Mrs. Chen, practical as always, pulled Daniel aside on moving day. "You're doing the right thing," she said. "That woman loves you both. And more importantly, you love her. Don't let anyone make you doubt that." "I won't," Daniel promised. "Good. And get Emma that dog she keeps talking about. Children need pets and yards and families that look like yours, all different shapes and sizes and perfectly imperfect." The move itself was chaotic, boxes and furniture, and Emma insisting on packing her own room, which resulted in finding her favorite stuffed rabbit wrapped in winter coats 6 months later. But when they finally arrived at the Portland house, when Emma ran through the empty room shrieking with delight, and Iris stood in the kitchen looking stunned that this was real, Daniel felt something settle in his chest. This was home. Not the place, but the people. Not the structure, but the choice to build something together. They settled into rhythms over the summer. Daniel working from the small office they'd set up, Iris traveling occasionally for foundation work but always coming home. Emma starting at her new school with the resilience of children who know they're loved and therefore can handle change. They got the dog, a rescue mutt named Archimedes, who Emma insisted was very smart despite evidence to the contrary. On a Sunday evening in early September, Daniel found Iris sitting on the front porch, watching Emma and Archimedes play in the yard. The light was golden, the air carried the first hint of autumn, and Iris looked more at peace than he'd ever seen her. He sat beside her and she leaned into him automatically, this gesture that had become so natural he couldn't remember when they'd started doing it. "I got an email today," Iris said, "from one of the researchers I funded. She just published a breakthrough paper on carbon capture technology. Said my funding made it possible, that she'd been rejected by every traditional investor before I took a chance on her." That's amazing. It is. And you know what I realized? That feeling, reading her email, knowing I helped make something important happen, it was better than any quarterly earnings report ever was. Better than any acquisition, any market triumph, any of the things I used to measure success by. Daniel kissed her temple. You found what you were looking for. I found more than that. I found out who I actually am when I'm not performing, and I like her better than the CEO. Emma ran over then, grass-stained and breathless, Archimedes bounding behind her. Iris, can we plant vegetables? For a garden? My teacher says gardens are important and I want to grow tomatoes. Absolutely. We can start planning it tonight. Emma beamed and ran back to her game, and Iris watched her with an expression that Daniel had learned to recognize. Wonder, mixed with gratitude, mixed with the particular fear of someone who'd finally let herself care deeply about something fragile. I have something I want to ask you, Iris said quietly, but I'm terrified you'll say no. Daniel's heart started hammering. Ask. She turned to face him fully, and in her eyes was vulnerability and hope in equal measure. I don't want to replace Sarah. I could never replace Sarah, and I wouldn't try. But I love you, Daniel, and I love Emma, and I want to build a family with you, officially. I want to wake up every morning knowing we chose this, chose each other, chose to be deliberately, intentionally together. Iris, let me finish. I'm not good at this, at romance, at big gestures. But I know what I want, and I want you, both of you. Not as a corporate merger or a strategic partnership, but as messy, imperfect, real family. She took a breath. Will you marry me? Daniel stared at her, this woman who'd walked away from an empire, who'd chosen vulnerability over control, who loved his daughter like she was her own. His throat was tight, his eyes stinging, and when he finally found words, they came out rough with emotion. Yes, God, yes, of course, yes. Iris's face crumpled in relief, and then they were kissing and laughing and crying a little, and Emma came running back demanding to know what was happening. Iris asked me to marry her, Daniel said. Emma's eyes went wide. And you said yes? I said yes. Good. Because I already told my class you were probably going to get married eventually, and it would have been embarrassing if I was wrong. She threw her arms around both of them. Can I be in the wedding? And can Archimedes? He's very good at ceremonies. You can definitely be in the wedding, Iris assured her. We'll figure out the dog situation. That night, after Emma was in bed, Iris and Daniel sat in their living room, their shared living room in their shared house with their shared life. And Daniel pulled out his phone. I want to show you something, he said. He opened his photos and found the picture from the San Francisco trip, the one Iris had taken of Emma on the pier with the sea lions behind her, mid-laugh, pure joy captured in perfect focus. I look at this sometimes, he said, and I remember that exact moment, when I realized I was falling in love with you. Not because of what you could give us or how you made my life easier, but because you saw Emma, really saw her, and delighted in her. Because you researched sea lions just to make a 6-year-old happy. Because underneath all the performance and the power, you were just someone looking for connection, same as me. Iris took the phone, studied the picture. I remember that moment too. I was terrified. I kept thinking I was going to screw this up, say the wrong thing, reveal how little I knew about parenting or normalcy or building something real. But you didn't screw it up. Neither did you. We figured it out together. They sat in comfortable silence, and Daniel thought about the journey from that first awkward meeting at a Cambridge cafe to this moment, sitting in their own home, planning a future that would have seemed impossible 6 months ago. Can I tell you something? Iris asked. That first night at the gala in Boston, when we were dancing, I almost told you then that I wasn't really an escort, that I was someone else entirely, but I was afraid you'd be angry or feel deceived or walk away. What stopped you from telling me? The way you looked at me, like I was just Iris, just a person, not a CEO or a success story or a prize to be won, just me. I'd forgotten what that felt like. I didn't want it to end. I'm glad you didn't tell me that night, Daniel said. Not because I like being deceived, but because we needed those few weeks of just being two people getting coffee. No expectations, no complications, just honest conversation. We've had a lot of honest conversations since then. And we'll have a lot more. Some of them will be hard. We'll fight about money or time or how to parent Emma as she gets older. We'll frustrate each other and disappoint each other and sometimes wonder if we made a mistake. Wow, this proposal acceptance speech is really romantic, Iris said dryly. Daniel laughed. What I mean is, It's going to be real, complicated and imperfect and sometimes hard. But it's also going to be worth it, because we're choosing this with our eyes open, knowing exactly who we are and what we're getting into. No performance? No performance, just us, being honest and imperfect together. Iris kissed him, soft and slow, a promise of all the years to come. I like the sound of that. They were married 3 months later in a small ceremony in their backyard with Emma as the flower girl and Archimedes in a bow tie that he tried to eat twice. Mrs. Chen flew in from Boston and cried through the entire ceremony. Richard and Linda came, and Patricia surprised everyone by showing up with a date. Dr. Sarah Chen sent a beautiful gift and a note thanking Iris for trusting her with the company. Marcus Holloway was not invited, though he sent a passive-aggressive note suggesting Iris would regret her choices. She threw it away without responding. The ceremony was simple, honest, exactly like them. Daniel's vows made Iris cry. Iris's vows made Emma declare loudly that this is the best family ever, and also, can we have cake now? They honeymooned in Maine, just a week at a cabin by the ocean, the three of them and Archimedes building sandcastles and cooking s'mores and being deliberately, wonderfully ordinary. On their last night, after Emma was asleep, Daniel and Iris walked along the beach under a sky full of stars. Do you ever miss it? Daniel asked. The company, the power, the importance? Iris thought about it honestly. Sometimes. Mostly I miss the feeling of building something, of solving complex problems. But I get that from the foundation work now, just in different ways. And I don't miss the performance, the constant need to prove myself, the isolation. She squeezed his hand. I don't miss who I had to be to maintain all that. Who are you now? I'm still figuring that out, but I think I'm someone who funds important research and plants vegetable gardens and teaches a 6-year-old to code. Someone who's learning to be soft without feeling weak. Someone who chose love over achievement and found out they're not mutually exclusive after all. That sounds like someone worth being. Yeah, I think she is. They stood at the water's edge, waves lapping at their feet, and Daniel thought about all the choices that had led them here. His decision to hire an escort for a gala. Iris's decision to go along with the mistaken identity. Their decision to keep meeting, to be honest, to choose each other despite all the logical reasons not to. Thank you, he said. For what? For being brave enough to be real with me. For loving Emma. For building this life with us even when it meant walking away from everything you'd built before. Thank you for seeing me, Iris countered. For looking past the performance to whoever was underneath. For showing me what home actually means. They walked back to the cabin hand in hand, and inside Emma was sprawled across the couch with Archimedes, both of them snoring softly. Iris covered them with a blanket while Daniel started the fire, and they settled in to watch the flames dance. Two people who'd found each other in the strangest way possible and built something real from what had started as performance. Years later, when people asked how they met, they'd laugh and say it was complicated. And it was. But it was also simple. Two people who'd been pretending to be something they weren't, finding each other and learning to be exactly who they were. Emma would grow up in that Portland house, with parents who loved her and each other, with a dog who never did get any smarter, with a garden that produced more tomatoes than they knew what to do with. She'd learned to code from Iris and learned to be brave from watching both her parents choose vulnerability over safety. She'd remember her birth mother with love and build a relationship with Iris that was entirely its own thing, not replacement, not copy, just real and chosen and earned. Iris's foundation would fund dozens of breakthrough innovations, changing industries and solving problems that had seemed insurmountable. She'd be profiled in magazines as the billionaire who walked away, the CEO who chose differently, the woman who proved success could be measured in impact rather than wealth. But she'd be most proud of the quiet work, the researchers she mentored, the quiet grants that made real differences. Daniel would write code from his home office, would coach Emma's soccer team despite knowing nothing about soccer, would stand in the kitchen making dinner while Iris worked late and think about how strange and perfect life could be when you stopped trying to control it. And on their 5th anniversary, sitting on that same front porch where Iris had proposed, watching Emma, now 11 and taller than seemed possible, playing in the yard with Archimedes and a new puppy she'd convinced them to adopt, Daniel would turn to his wife and say, "Best mistake you ever made, hiring that escort service." and Iris would laugh and kiss him and say, "Best mistake I ever made was everything that came after." Because love, real love, wasn't about perfect beginnings or flawless execution. It was about two imperfect people choosing each other over and over through every complication and challenge and unexpected turn. It was about building something intentional from what had started as accident. It was about being brave enough to be seen, vulnerable enough to be hurt, honest enough to be real. It was about choosing differently, choosing better, choosing love. And they had. The end.